Ladies and gentlemen, let's go. We ain't got no time to waste. Let's go. You are now listening to Jason Anderson, and you are in the zone.
You're in the zone with Jason Anderson on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Batting sixth, the first baseman, number 35, Eric Hosmer.
Eric Hosmer getting a wonderful ovation from the Royal Faithful.
You're in the zone on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
All right, a Friday edition of The Zone right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you, Josh Brisco, Beards. We head up until 2 o'clock. We've got you for the next 4 hours. We'll talk some baseball today. We'll talk some NFL football today as well. We'll talk some law. We'll get into the law. We'll really break that down. We'll hold an entire class today. Professor Brisco.
Yes.
Doubtful. But we will talk some, you know what? Let's talk some contract law. Let's talk some NFL, CBA law, criminal law. Let's do that at some point today. We actually will do that coming up in the noon hour with Dan Lust, who is the co-host of the Conduct Detrimental podcast and also a New York Law School professor. And we'll get his thoughts on what the next steps are with the Deshaun Watson saga in the NFL, as they have appealed and now they have assigned Peter Harvey to be the person hearing and then ruling on the appeal. And as most people assume, implementing and instituting the full-year ban, as doing the bidding of what Roger Goodell would do anyway, but to make it seem like he's being more impartial, that he's designated somebody else to then do this while this person has essentially been working for the league for a while. So we'll see what the next steps are with that. Get Dan Lust's thoughts on the overall case, the overall investigation and the ruling, and where it goes from here. We'll talk with him coming up in the noon hour. Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus will be our guest at 1 o'clock, and we'll get his thoughts and talk to him about, the Miami tampering scandal, because, you know, he's stationed down in Tampa, and he covered the Bucs for a long time as he's moved on to Pro Football Focus and hosting a podcast of the NFL Stock Exchange, which is just a draft podcast. It's great. If you like the NFL draft, he's really good, and that podcast is really good. Also, you can read his stuff up at Pro Football Focus. I think a couple of weeks ago, he's got a longer story about Deuce Vaughn at PFF, and Deuce Vaughn sort of bursting onto the scene and now putting himself in the conversation for, you know, moving up the draft board next year for the 2023 draft. So he does a great job covering the draft, but the NFL overall. And so Miami tampering scandal, sort of his thoughts on that whole thing. But of course, getting into the Chiefs and the Chiefs offense and where they go this year, the wide receiver room, a lot of things that I'm curious to talk to him about, the defensive side of the football as well. They also, in one of their more recent episodes, I can't remember which one, but they did a full NFL redraft. So every player available, and they went by this year's 2022's draft order. I will go ahead and give away that the number one pick was Patrick Mahomes.
Chiefs didn't land him in the 30, 29, 28, kind of down there.
It was unfortunate.
They didn't try to move up to go get him.
Yeah, it turns out the Jags were not willing to give up that draft pick for Patrick Mahomes. So Mahomes went first, Josh Allen went second, and then they had a conversation about those two, about choosing between those two. And I thought that was interesting. So if we have time, I hope we do, I definitely want to get his thoughts on how close that is, like how close he thinks that discussion, and maybe not just from his opinion, like 32 front offices. Because I don't think 32 out of 32 would say we're definitely taking Patrick Mahomes. I don't know what the breakdown would be. I think more of the front offices would go with Mahomes, so he would have the majority. But I certainly think there's going to be a front office or two that would go, well, we just love what Josh Allen does with the legs, and he offers that part of it. He's got the strong arm. He's an ascending player. Maybe we haven't seen the best of Josh Allen, and is Mahomes just going to be, a unicorn the rest of his career where Josh Allen is ascending? Like, I can see where a front office would go that route. I've said before on the air that this attempt to bring the person that is on the level of Patrick Mahomes for the last few years of the younger guys, of it's Lamar and Mahomes, and then it's Josh Allen and Mahomes, and then it's Justin Herbert and Mahomes, and it's Joe Burrow and Mahomes. The one constant through all of that has, one, been baseball, Ray, and two, it's been the comparison to Patrick Mahomes. But I've said earlier that if somebody wants to argue Josh Allen, I disagree. But I won't sit there and build an entire case about how that's absurd. Whereas if they want to argue Herbert or Burrow, okay, well, I'm gonna dig my heels in and we'll go at it. Josh Allen, okay, I get it, totally. Disagree. Here are the reasons why I would go Patrick Mahomes. But I don't think you're off your rocker if you say I'll take Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes. So we'll see.
There are a few things that make this not apples to apples. I understand that, but I think it's funny that every time you talk about Josh Allen, it's like, and he can do it with his legs. That's a huge bonus. And every time you talk about Lamar Jackson, he's like, he's too reliant on his legs, and that's a knock. It's like,
yeah.
I think, there's some differences. They're built different. I know.
The passing aspect that Josh Allen has just somehow figured out how to throw accurate passes
in the NFL. After becoming an NFL quarterback.
Yeah. And his first year, he was bad.
Yeah,
I mean, his first year in Buffalo, he was, and rookies typically are, but his first year in Buffalo, I mean, he looked like the guy in Wyoming.
Yeah.
And then slowly but surely now he's a guy that's, 73% and, expected completion, over what, it actually was, has continued to go up and up and up for him as well. So, we'll talk with him about that and a couple of points on the defense that I want to get into, because it kind of goes in line with what the Chiefs have done, adding in Carlos Dunlap and the rookies. So we'll get into all of that before the show is over. Matt Derrick will be our guest coming up at 11 o'clock. We will talk with him about the Chiefs specifically and training camp and what he's seen and things like that. 913-912-4810 is the text line to be a part of the show, part of the conversation. 913-912-4810. We will talk about the Royals, a couple of points from that. There's a tweet out there that Shane told you about that you were laughing and you walked in and you're like, okay, I can't tell you until it's on the air. And I don't know what this is related to. Is it Royals? Is it Chiefs?
No. The initial subject, Matt, this is one of those that you're just going to have to let take your time to find the funny.
Okay.
Because none of it's funny on the surface.
Take your time to find the funny. Okay.
Sometime, and that's the unofficial tagline of the Zone. It might take a minute, but we'll try to get there.
Somebody was like, what's it like listening to the Zone? Well, you got to take your time to find the funny.
You take your time to find the funny, and maybe eventually it'll come around and sneak up on you. Because this is like 3 levels deep. But the original topic is Deshaun Watson, which is intrinsically unfunny. Even this story has sort of an irony to it, but it's not like, ha-ha. It's like, oh, kind of depressing. This is the headline, Cleveland hosting National Massage Therapist Convention 1 block away from Brown Stadium.
Oh, no.
And that's pretty bad. But then what Shane pointed out is the website. Could you read the name of the website this is on?
Oh, no. It's Saturday Night Live. It's
the Jeopardy.
Yeah, Jeopardy. Therapist.
The URL is therapist.news. But if you're reading a one-word URL as a couple of words on this topic, there are a couple of different websites who perhaps could have covered this Deshaun Watson case with their respective URLs.
The point, I think it's sort of the mind being subjective, that when you look at it that way and the background is the talk of Deshaun Watson and you see that website, your mind goes one way, as opposed to if it was, well, there's this, hosting over at, T-Mobile, they're going to have this huge physical therapy session, and all of these physical therapists from across the country are going to be there. Also, mental health awareness, there's going to be that there as well. And you look at the website, you might think something different immediately when you look at it.
I got nervous, so I started scrolling through therapist.news, and there are stories about outdoor summer recreation therapy,
That's right,
music therapy,
helps,
mental health resources,
great,
cancer hormone therapy. Like there are a lot of medical-based stories here, pet therapy. But in the context of Deshaun Watson, it's less therapist and more of the
right. Yeah, no, that's
that he is.
Wow.
And I just,
wow.
It's one of those things that it's one of those things that you see and you gasp and then you laugh and then you get really sad again. And that's the process that I went through this morning. I just wanted to share that with you.
I get really sad from the sports side because I like the saying of "Don't let sports make you stupid," and any tweet that's out there about Deshaun Watson is immediately replied to by about 50 Browns fans about how this is all BS and, ridiculous and he shouldn't have been suspended at all. And it's just, you change the jersey and none of those people would feel that way.
Oh, yeah. It is all the laundry determines that. I mean, we see that all the time.
I hate that.
Which is honestly... Here, I'm going to go ahead left turn into something more positive so I don't get stuck here.
Let's do that.
The audio in the intro today is Eric Hosmer coming back to Kauffman Stadium in another team's colors and another team's laundry and being treated like a world champion Kansas City Royal.
That's exactly right.
Gosh darn it, when you get those moments, that makes you feel a little better about the sickness that sports can occasionally impart on people because you go through that whole process. Hosmer leaves, gets his money, goes to another new team, even since then, obviously, just a little bit ago with the trade of the Red Sox, and then comes back to Kauffman with the ovation. And if anyone hasn't seen the picture of Salvador Perez just cheesing as hard as anyone has ever cheesed as Hosmer's walking up to the plate.
Mm-hmm. And the hug. I mean,
just great moments on great moments. So there's my palate cleanser for you.
I thought it was really cool the way that it was handled, while also being annoyed at the same time.
Oh, okay. Why were you annoyed?
Because my wife and I were going to the August 26th Friday night game with the Padres. I say were because I don't know that we're still going to go that night.
Yeah.
Because we were going to go that night and the 27th because the 27th is the I Love the 90s concert.
Yes, I saw that.
Which we're going to.
Good.
But we also got tickets for the 26th because it was Hosmer's return to Kansas City, and she... has an affinity for. She thinks he's a looker. She likes Eric Hosmer. Our first pet that we had together was named Hosmer. That's
pretty good.
Not Eric Hosmer. After some other person. We just randomly.
What kind of pet?
It was a cat.
Okay. You said was, so that makes me think.
Well, it is a cat. The cat turned on my wife when she got pregnant and started attacking her.
Oh.
And
so the cat is still alive.
We had to then
it's just
give
not
it up.
With you.
We had to give it we gave it to a no-kill shelter.
You traded it to Boston and said
San Diego first.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Now it's been traded to Boston. But yes, the cat turned. I mean, Hosmer would wait around the corner, and we didn't have him declawed. Hosmer would wait around the corner, and as my wife would walk, he would jump out and try to scratch her legs. Then,
why did Hosmer's view of your wife change so much when she got pregnant?
Look, man.
I wish we could ask Hosmer that.
Nature. Well, look, can somebody interview him tonight? Can somebody out there?
I don't know if you
Lynn,
do you microchip. Do you microchip?
Can somebody text? Can you text Alec Lewis and have him ask Hosmer tonight why Hosmer the cat turned on my? There's something with nature.
Oh, you're talking about the cat. I'm sorry, I was very confused.
Yeah, it is odd that Eric Hosmer would hide around the corner in Louisville to then jump out at my cat.
Did you guys look into that? Is that like a thing that cats do sometimes?
It's like a scent. It's
really?
It's like a something to where it's like, okay, is this now a person that's supposed to be in the house? And then when we had Everett, the cat was still doing that. And then also a little bit towards the baby, which was not a good idea for him. And we decided, let's go ahead and make this decision now before Everett sort of starts realizing this is like his pet.
Yes.
And then he starts to miss it.
Yes, good work. That's smart.
So we had to make a decision, and we had to just let Hosmer walk in free agency.
Sometimes you gotta let the ones you love most go, and that was the case for Hosmer in multiple occasions. I'm now reading 8 reasons why cats attack pregnant women.
See?
I didn't know this was the thing. I'm deathly allergic to cats. I like the cats I've been around just fine. I'm not anti-cat by any means, but I've just always, my family's always had dogs. Renee got Scout the dog, which has now become our dog. I'm a dog person at this point.
I'd rather have dogs than cats.
I don't think I've ever heard of a dog turning on a pregnant woman. That for me is I don't know that I've ever heard. Maybe they get territorial whenever there's a new baby around or something.
Jed Marshall, known cat lover.
He is the reason that I am afraid to be anti-cat on any level.
He has texted in and said, sounds like a wife problem, not a cat problem. Also, to the text line, not the secret backdoor text line to my personal phone, but to the text line, 913-912-4810. It's why I love the listeners so much of this show. The first 3 texts that came in, more are coming in as well, but different. The first 3 that have come in is the dog named Mitch. Jason, was your next pet named Mitch? Jason, why didn't Mitch help your wife out? I love you guys so much. I really do. Even though that is mean. No, we don't have another pet since then, okay? And it wouldn't be named Mitch. And Mitch didn't help my wife because we lived in a different city, okay? And enough with that, okay? There's nothing there. Nothing there. I don't know why people just assume this. Just because when we had Mitch Holtis on weekly, he would somehow talk about my wife often in the interviews. Which is how this whole thing started. But it's great. But yes, so
he just puts the hammer down, baby. I don't know what to tell you, man. There's some things you just
is huge. So yeah, I was a little annoyed last night. It was awesome, loved it, but a little annoyed because we were going to be there on August 26th. On that Friday night when the Padres were coming into town.
Padres still fun baseball. Arguably more fun baseball now. You have traded out Eric Hosmer for Juan Soto.
Right, we'll go.
But that's not why you were going.
Right.
You weren't going to see.
She may not want to go now,
Yeah.
So we're going Saturday.
Have you showed her pictures of Juan Soto?
Yeah, she doesn't care.
Not interested?
No.
Okay. All right.
So I may be going like with somebody else.
Okay.
Or, because we hadn't bought the tickets yet for that. So we just may not even go at all.
Well, look, if you want to just go with someone, here's what I'm willing to say. I would be willing to go with you if what you need is just for me to try to make you feel small. Maybe I talk about how handsome all the players are.
Yeah.
Don't really talk to you directly. Kind of just shout like my phone number to players, just to kind of get. I want you to have the experience. Beards could probably do that also. Beards can be the one that makes you feel insufficient. In front of not your wife in that instance, but hopefully a sold out Kauffman Stadium if nothing else.
Yeah, I do wonder how many tickets have been sold for that Padres game already. For that Friday night.
I get a T-shirt that says, I'm here because Jason... It's going to have small text, but it would say, I'm here because Jason's wife wanted to see Eric Hosmer, but instead she's in Boston right now, and we don't have any other further details.
913...
It's a lot of text, but I fit it all in there. I got a lot of
It's a
torso.
lot, yes. It's a very odd shirt. It's not one that you can just randomly buy at a store. Did you get that from Dillard's?
That'll be a custom
Is that a
piece.
Rally House shirt?
It might just be a
Does that come in
Sharpie.
different colors?
I bet Rally House can make that happen.
All right, 913-912-4810. But Eric Hosmer returned to Kansas City last night. It was really cool, and it did bring back memories. And I do wonder sort of what it was like for him. I know he talked about that it was odd that he's, having all these memories just flood back to him when he arrives in Kansas City and then going down to the plaza and then heading to the stadium and things like that. Like, yeah, I can imagine what that was like when you've been in the organization for that long and been a part of a team for that long and been the face of a franchise for that long, and you have those banners hanging out there, the flags that are flying because you were such a big part of that. Obviously, it was an entire team, but you were such a big part, the face of that team. When people think back to that 2015 World Series, I think a lot of people might remember, Hosmer's mad dash home, and against the Mets in Game 5. I mean, that's one of the first things that comes to mind. Alex Gordon's home run in Game 1 against Familia, one of the things that comes to mind, right? So, Escobar's leadoff home run, Syndergaard throwing at Escobar's head, to start a game. There's a lot of things that come to mind, but one of those certainly, when you think of the faces of that team, it's Eric Hosmer. And so seeing him back in Kansas City last night was really awesome. It was a cool moment, and he looks the same. Right,
he really does.
Salvi's out there. Those two are standing next to each other, and you're like, Salvi and Hosmer are there, and I'm thinking back that little man is going into first grade starting a week from today, and he was born 5 days after the Royals won the World Series.
Wow!
And he starts first grade in 7 days, and they beat the Mets that night in New York, and 5 days later he was born. It doesn't seem like it's been that long.
Yeah.
While also at the same time feeling like he should be a high schooler.
Yes.
Because it has also felt like it's been that long when you're living through the losses on the 100-loss team and the 100-loss team, and then a pandemic year, and then they're going to be ready to start competing in a season that was awful, and then they're going to compete in 2022, and then pacing for 100 losses. Like, it feels like it's been so long, and it feels like Hosmer has been in San Diego for like 10 years,
Really does.
but also it feels like, dang, you see Hosmer back, you're like, it was just like it was yesterday that you were watching Hosmer play first base. And then we talked about Prado and has some Hosmer in him defensively. And then to see Hosmer sort of step over the bag while catching it and drag his right foot on the bag. They called him safe. They reviewed it. The player was out. As soon as they called him safe, he looked over to the Red Sox dugout. Was like, review that. I had my foot there. Just like that small little footwork just for so long, just taking for granted when you see him do those things. So it was nice to see him back. And then also a deep fly ball to the wall.
Beards and I were watching Bullet Train during this game, so I only have some of the details. I do have a great review of Bullet Train whenever you need it, though. We had a great time with it.
I was going to ask you at some point today about what that was, how it was last night, and the trivia, and
I'll file that away for later.
Yeah.
One other part, I think the timing of it all. You're so right about, because, like you said, he looks the same. Salvi's still behind the plate, smiling at him, and in a lot of ways, because that really was the last era of Royals baseball that had a clear definition. You had 2 World Series appearances, the win, and then the guys start kind of scattering. But that's the last concrete Royals moment that I think most of us probably have. You might have the Whit Merrifield era, which is I think what you have to call everything from starting to lose to now.
But is there a moment to where you go, Whit Merrifield, what do you think of? Go.
No, absolutely not. And they also weren't winning during that time,
exactly.
which again isn't Merrifield's fault. He just was probably He was a differentiating factor between the previous class.
It's Mike Sweeney. He's a best player on a bad team.
Yeah,
or one of the best players on bad teams.
Yeah, he might be Mike Sweeney. That's a pretty good. I think it's a pretty good pull. But the other part with Hosmer, when I think back to the World Series teams, Lorenzo Cain was probably the best player on that team. Mm-hmm. Alex Gordon is probably the most beloved player on that team. Salvi, obviously, especially at this point, you've seen that more. So, but at the time, I think it was Alex Gordon. Mike Moustakas was incredibly important to that team. But Eric Hosmer was the attitude. He's who I think of doing the backpack, like that type of the extra flavoring on an organization, on a team, on a run that you go back and you remember. Like, he was the closest thing the Royals had to Travis Kelce, I think, of someone where you say, hey, there's like a step beyond what his stardom could become. And if he would have gone somewhere other than San Diego or played better in San Diego, maybe he would have hit it. Maybe he could have been Mark Teixeira if he would have ended up in New York and had played some great baseball in Yankee Stadium. I don't know. But for Kansas City, it felt like he was very often, again, the attitude or the energy of that team that had a lot of great and important pieces. I still think Hosmer kind of stands out from that group, despite you could pick anywhere between, I don't know, 1 and 4 or 5 in terms of his importance, and I think you could have a reasonable take for a lot of those. And still, he stands above in my memory a lot.
The attitude part is really interesting because the way he carried himself with that team for so long, Royals fans, and it seemed like Royals players and the organization were trying to be the little engine that could.
Yeah.
And always swimming upstream and trying to catch the cool kids.
Right.
And, they're in high school and their clique is like, not as cool as the kids over there. And like, that'd be cool. And they're like, kind of appease them a little. Oh, you want to come over? That's fine. You can come hang out a little bit.
For a couple seasons.
But you're not in this group, okay? And then Hosmer, and that group overall, because it can't just be one player. It's that group overall. It's Lorenzo Cain, how good he was. It's Salvi, what he was turning into be. It was Moustakas. It was Hosmer as well. But Hosmer just had a cockiness to him.
Yeah.
Like a swagger of just like, I know I'm hot bleep.
Right.
I know I'm hot Shane.
Right.
And I'm, and I don't care what you think of me. And I think a lot of the players probably took on that persona. And I think the city and Royals fans started taking on that persona because, it's like, what? This team is damn good.
Yeah.
And in the 14 World Series or the 14 playoffs, it did feel like this is improbable. I cannot believe we're going on this magical ride that's like a once-in-a-lifetime type deal. And then it struck midnight, and the carriage turned into a pumpkin.
Right.
And the third out in the ninth inning happened of Game 7. But that next year, it was the first time I can ever remember that the team I rooted for was the best team in the American League, and I knew it. And they were a team that I felt they need to go and win the World. They now have the pressure on them to show that they're good enough to go and win the World Series. Last year was not a fluke. This is a damn good team. And then went out there and acted like that and played like that. And Hosmer was a big part of it. Just kind of a bleep you, and I know my Shane doesn't stink. And so that's the way I'm going to go about it. No, by the way, that cool click over there, we'll let you guys hang out from time to time.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of that. That's what I think that group of players did for the city and did for the organization. And obviously, the memories and the flags and the title, all a big deal. But, I mean, there's the group of players in the 70s and 80s with Royals fans that they'll have in their memories for a long time. And there's this group of players for the newer age, younger generation Royals fans. Unfortunately, there's a long gap in between. And God, I hope there's not a long gap after. That it's not the 70s and 80s group that you remember, and then this group we're talking about. And then who knows after that? I don't know. But you're right. Hosmer, was he the best player? Was he the best hitter? Was he all of these things? But he's kind of like the face of sort of that. Might be the third or fourth best player, but is he the guy you go to, sort of that leader of the pack that is kind of cocky and is like, no, we've arrived and we're good enough and we know we're good enough and we're going to have that swag and you can't come and bully us around. You know why? Because we're going to fight you.
Right.
Because we'll get in fights. You know why? Because we're cocky now. We know we're good. We've been trying to see if we're good enough. We know we're good. And don't try to test us because we're not going to be the kids that get bullied anymore. Okay? We're going to fight back. Literally, if that's what it takes. We will go from being the beloved Royals and scrappy team to this team's kind of freaking annoying. Mm-hmm. Who do they think they are? Mm-hmm. You know, you're not. It was a cool, fun story last year, but you're the Royals. Find your place, man. And that group of players refused to, and that was awesome. And it's one of the really cool points of last night, seeing that the standing ovation, and just every time Hosmer was up at the plate, seeing his parents as well that the broadcast showed, I thought was really cool. So we'll take a timeout. We'll come back. Something tangible from the Royals from last night, not just resurfacing memories from yesteryears, but something tangible about now moving forward with this organization from last night. We'll get into and talk about that on the other side of the break. We'll talk with Matt Derrick at 11 o'clock, some Chiefs football. Daniel Lust, he is from the co-host of Conduct Detrimental Podcast, New York Law School professor as well, talking about the latest developments in the Deshaun Watson case. And then Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus, talking some Chiefs and some NFL. All that's still to come. It's a Friday edition of The Zone. We continue rolling along with more next.
Want to see more of The Zone? Watch the show live on the Sports Radio 810 WHB Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. The Zone with Jason Anderson.
All right, we take a timeout. We come back. We wrap up this hour next. Do we not wrap up this hour
No,
next?
you still have. This is your last segment, buddy.
You're not
so
used to this.
being. Oh
You're
my
not
goodness,
used
man.
to this. You took a break.
left.
You took a break way early.
It's way too early for a break.
Weird.
On Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Tex says it was Draw Dyson that had the swag of the team. Haas was the pretty face of the team. I think Draw Dyson certainly had some swag, but you needed to be an everyday player to have that. And Hosmer absolutely had the swag. Hosmer had the I'm walking up to the plate and I'm a badass.
Dyson was absolutely, that's what speed do. And the
vroom,
the vroom vroom of it all absolutely belongs to Draw Dyson. No question whatsoever there. I am continuing to bang the drum on behalf of Eric Hosmer being the Travis Kelce energy of those Royals.
Now,
it's not quite the same, but it's close.
He was also the pretty face of the team. I mean, so he was also
Just like
that.
Travis Kelce.
Yeah, no,
Good
I don't.
point. Wow,
Yeah, no,
great point.
I everything you've said, I thought was just you continuing to agree with me more and more because I think
Absolutely.
that's that kind of bleep you. The maybe a referee throws a flag and you make a hand gesture. Maybe the ump calls you out and you throw a knowing glare in his general direction. I'm just saying. I think that Eric Hosmer and Travis Kelce share some similar sports DNA. I don't know that they're related, but metaphorically speaking.
Yes. Tex says, I had tickets to the Friday night Padres game also. Thought I was the only one annoyed with the trade because others in our group have all the Red Sox games tickets. Yeah. Probably one of those groups that gets season tickets and then splits them, does like a draft.
Yeah.
My brother does that.
Ooh, doing that as a draft is great. I like that a lot.
It's a great idea. So, yeah.
Boy, it's good.
But if you looked ahead and you were like, Padres, August, all right, I'm taking that Friday night game.
That's a high draft pick. But also, you're going to have teams. Yeah, I'm going to keep it. You're going to have people/teams who have some games not on their draft board at all because maybe they're going to be out of town or whatever. So you gotta do your research. That's kind of fun. I like the idea of doing a draft with some stakes to it that way.
Tex says, hey guys, can you please give a quick shout out to my buddy Jay Cullinan, #1 faithful Zone listener in Baltimore, Maryland. What's up, Jay?
Shout out to Jay.
Shout out to Jay. He is the #1, and we did a study on this over a course of 6 months, and Jay did win. He is the #1 faithful Zone listener in Baltimore, Maryland. That's a very tough group to ascend to the top of. But what is up, Jay? Tex says Locane was the real leader of those teams, not Haas. Well, I think everybody had different roles.
Leader, though.
Yeah, different roles.
I feel like I've made some people upset about the other players on this team. I'm saying that team has 4, 5, 6 different arguments for best player, most important player, leader, face, energy, whatever. I think Hosmer is sort of the swagger of it.
Tex says JFC, you two sound like the geeks everyone picked on. That was a GD psychiatry session. It was like a 6-minute Freudian slip. Well, a couple things.
Yeah, first of all, that's not what a Freudian slip is.
I would say look up Freudian slip.
Yeah, do your best to learn anything about Freud.
Yeah.
Call your parents, man. Or don't.
Probably. And it's one of two things. That's the texter who was triggered by hearing those things and immediately went back to high school when he got picked on. Or it was the guy who did the bullying and now just sucks at life, and the people that he used to bully and pick on are now his bosses.
Yeah, well, so here, listen. Hey,
it's
texter,
one of those two things. I'm assuming
we're gonna good cop, bad cop this. So Jason, you can be bad cop for this text.
I like being good cop though.
Well, you called him a loser or got picked on.
I said it's one of the two.
You call him a loser. I'm gonna go the other direction.
One of the two. I didn't say he was a loser.
Texter.
I didn't say he definitely was.
When you were
just because the people you picked on now are your bosses doesn't mean that you're a loser. You could be second in line of running Google. Doesn't make you a loser, but whoever is running it could be the person you picked on. That's what I'm saying.
Texter, when you were in the womb, did you later learn that your family sent away your family's beloved cat because they turned against your mother and really turned against you in a way that made you feel responsible
That's right.
for the loss of your family's beloved pet? Have you carried that tension,
Correct.
that that stress, that guilt with you through your life all the way to this point. Have you ever considered what those feelings may lead to? Have you ever read anything by Sigmund Freud? Did you know his first name was Sigmund? Have you tried dissecting any of these issues? Have you tried therapy? You just sort of threw the phrase therapy session out there in a very derogatory way, Texter. And I'm frankly, Texter, I'm worried about you.
Now we've got an issue in Maryland.
Oh, is there another Maryland Texter?
Text in 913-912-4810 says, I call BS on Jay's title. He can have Baltimore. Nobody wants it anyway. I'll take the zone fandom title for all of Maryland.
Wow.
Melvin in Maryland.
I think, well, boy, Maryland Melvin really rolls off the tongue. I having alliteration, but Baltimore J is not quite as good.
I also like the trash talk along with, he can have Baltimore. Nobody wants it anyway.
Nobody wants
I'll take the entire
Baltimore.
state.
That's beautiful.
Of Maryland.
I feel like I'm going to try to get to know, the existing zone fans better, the ones that have been here longer than I have, and really help them try to unpack some things. Hey, Baltimore, I'm sure if you're from Baltimore, you have a lot of pride there. If you have the rest of Maryland, you guys can coexist. It's okay.
By the way, the text that came in earlier that I didn't see, this is great, because you were at the movie, so you may not have seen this.
I almost certainly didn't.
Text says, how about the patented Haas dive into first base when he would have been safe had he run through the bag?
Did that happen last night?
Yeah, it happened last night.
Oh, my goodness.
It's so great.
I got to find a highlight.
He did that, and I was like, there it is.
He did the thing.
He did it just for old time's sake.
If anybody asked him that after the game, I bet there was a little bit. I just wanted to feel the Kaufman first base dirt in my beard again.
He did that. He did that for nostalgia purposes.
Had to.
I mean, he swings and the ball's going down the first base line, and he's running. Bubic picks it up and tosses it to Dozier, and of course Hosmer's got to slide head first and get that hand in there. It was a little late. I don't think he would have been safe either way, but it was great that he did that.
By the way, we were talking earlier about comparing Travis Kelce and Eric Hosmer. We have a comment on the Twitch stream. Is Christian Cologne then Dirty Dan?
Oh, wow. Who was Dirty Dan?
That's not. Well, here's the thing, because when we talk about Dan Sorensen, we've got to remember the good times, and in the good time sense, Christian Cologne being Dirty Dan is a pretty good shout.
What about Terrence Gore? Because Terrence Gore had big moments, but wasn't a main part of it. Had big moments in big games that you remember him for certain things, but then as he stayed around, it was just like, this guy's not good enough anymore.
That would be like Terrence Gore playing outfield 8 out of 9 innings is the problem with that scenario.
Yeah. But right, if he stayed around and then he was like an everyday player, you're right from that standpoint. But I'm just thinking, like, you want to remember Terrence Gore for all the good things because he was awesome, but he didn't do a whole lot. He had some impactful plays, but not a whole lot, and he was a beloved figure at that time. But then as he stayed around, he just wasn't good. It's not a good comparison. It's not great.
I think that might make him DeMarcus Robinson.
No, because Terrence Gore didn't run backwards.
I think. Although, as an outfielder, he probably should have more. That actually might have helped.
Although
he insisted at starting on the warning track and only ever running forward, which I'm not sure is the right strategy.
Although, could Terrence Gore have stolen second base running backwards?
Yes.
I think there's a chance.
Yes, I think absolutely.
Tex says Terrence Gore equals McCole Hardman or Niall Davis.
Niall Davis might be it.
Really?
Niall Davis is good.
Why?
Yeah, because
he wasn't on a championship team.
Well,
Niall Davis didn't play for the. I'm talking about the Super Bowl winning team.
I'm on the Super Bowl roster again now, and that's.
Plus, Niall Davis fumbled all the time. Niall Davis, big moment on the kickoff return. Houston absolutely got it started, and it was like, okay, they're finally going to break this stretch.
Do you know D'Anthony Thomas has a Super Bowl ring from the Chiefs? I forgot about that.
Yeah, he was on the team for a little bit, right?
Yeah, for 6 games that year.
Yep.
Wearing number 84. Apparently. I have no memory of him wearing 84. Yeah, Sammy Watkins was too good. I don't know. I love the cross-sport effort we're making here now.
I enjoy this as well. We should spend the entire show, except for when we talk to Matt Derrick, Daniel Lust, and Trevor Sikkema.
Matt Derrick will give us the right answer, actually.
Is Sammy Watkins Alex Rios?
No.
Sammy Watkins... Can Sammy Watkins be the combo of Aoki and Rios?
No, he's Ben Zobrist.
Oh, I don't think he's Ben Zobrist.
I think he's been Zobrist.
No,
they played roughly the same percentage of the time, even though Zobrist was only here for half a season.
T. Suggs has been Zobrist.
That comment was also made.
T. Suggs comes over.
Ben Zobrist was so much more impactful than Terrell Suggs was, though.
Terrell Suggs comes over and plays second half of the season and helps out, right? T. Suggs was 19, right? Or was he 20?
Yeah, no, he was 19.
I got
He was on
really
the Super Bowl
confused
team.
very quickly. I'm like, I'm pretty sure T. Suggs was on that, but I started to doubt myself.
No, but
I know that Zobrist was way more impactful than
Is he Tyrann
Suggs.
Mathieu?
he had Terrell Suggs in those playoffs had 4 tackles
Yeah?
and a pass
Those were-
defended.
Those were big tackles. Do you remember them? I don't either. But I'm just saying, like, the only comparison there is that, they traded for him.
He's
Mid-season.
Jabba Chamberlain.
Chaba was on?
I don't know, actually. He's on the... I just saw his name, and I got very happy because Jabba Chamberlain was... I was literally yesterday thinking, was Jabba Chamberlain briefly a Royal? He has no stats, but he is on the roster here of the 2015 Royals.
Of course he was. Of course Jabba was that guy. All right, 913-912-4810. Text says Sammy is Christian Cologne.
Can Sammy be Johnny Cueto?
This is an interesting one. Says Sammy is Christian Cologne. One big catch/hit. So, I mean...
I don't know.
Toasting Seymour is what you remember. When you think of Sammy Watkins, what do you think of?
I think
of toasting Richard Seymour running down.
And the touchdown in the AFC Championship game. He had 2 huge moments against the Titans, or the clinching play against 50, the Titans was Sammy
That's one
Watkins.
of them. The first thing I think of is the play against Richard Seymour.
Sure, but he's got at least 2 clutch moments.
Well, Christian Cologne has 2 clutch moments.
Richard Seymour.
Sorry.
You did it like 3 times.
I
now.
did it 3 times.
I didn't catch
4
it even
times.
once.
Yes, I'll keep saying it from now on, by the way.
I'm not
Cologne's
here for
got 2
disrespecting
big-
Sammy Watkins. I think I'll disrespect Beards every
I know.
time he tells us to take a break.
By the way, the text coming in now, Richard Seymour, that would be a Freudian slip if I was actually thinking of something from the Patriots or the Raiders. Or
If you
something
called him like Richard P. Moore, it might be a Freudian slip. But there's got to be something phallic related to it, which I don't think the original texter picked up on.
yes, Richard Sherman.
Oh, that makes more
Text
sense.
says, because Christian Cologne had the big hit and he also got drafted. Those are the 2 big moments that happened with Christian Cologne in his Royals career. Text says, does that make Bubba Starling Breland speaks?
Follow the show on Twitter at J810Anderson, at JB Briscoe, at Beards McFly, and at Sports Radio 810. The Zone with Jason Anderson.
Nice job, Josh.
Nice job, Dylan.
Nice job, Christopher. Way to go, Beards.
Thank you.
Weekdays from 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
You want Jabba Chamberlain stats or Vince Scully stats, Jason?
Yes.
Quick, how many innings did Jabba Chamberlain pitch for the 2015 Royals?
2/3.
Beards.
69.
5 2/3 total innings.
I had the 2/3 part.
His ERA just under 8. You want a Vince Scully stat?
Yes.
From Brian A. Graham, Vince Scully's first year on Dodger games was Connie Mack's last as a manager. There wasn't a baseball season from 1886 through 2016 without one or the other working in it.
That's amazing.
1886!
It's a long time ago. Text says to the other two Maryland listeners, want to fight for zone listener superiority. That's Jason in Frederick, Maryland. Jason, Jay, and Melvin. They're going to meet somewhere and fight it out for number one. Matt Derrick next. All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you. Josh Brisco, Beards, Matt Derrick, hanging out with us here. Sports Radio 810 WHB. What is up, man?
What is up? I don't know if I've ever been Twitched before.
Welcome to Twitch. That camera right there, right over there. See that,
right
that
there.
eye in the sky?
It's the eye in
What's
the
up?
sky.
They're
It never
here to
lies.
watch Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com.
The eye in the sky never lies.
Can we do the entire show with just this music looping underneath? I feel like this totally changes the vibe.
My vibe has changed.
Don't you feel like your vibe's changed?
My vibe has changed.
You're also not in St. Joe right now, which is probably pretty nice.
It's pretty comfortable. I'm going to say
What?
that. It is nice and cool in this studio.
What's a longer drive, to St. Joe from your house or to here?
You know what? It's almost the exact same.
man.
I know. So I'm like, well, your day off, but you're still going to come down here. I appreciate
It's a
it.
few more miles to St. Joe, but faster.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
because of the speed and everything.
But pretty much a straight shot, too, almost.
But yeah, no, it's almost the exact same amount of
Interesting.
time. Yeah,
Interesting,
and yet
so-
for some strange reason, I actually leave for St. Joe ahead of schedule and on time and arrive well before I'm supposed to be there.
Good for you.
Whereas here,
Well,
I just roll in whenever, you
Sure.
know.
sure, that's your main job
I
there,
may
you know?
be here before the beginning of the show, and I may not.
Yeah.
You never know.
I think if you're going to pick one to maybe be a little bit late for, I would probably go with this one as opposed to Chiefs practice.
Yeah.
I for those who follow me on the Twitter, you may know I'm currently playing a game with Vitaly Gurman, one of the offensive linemen on the Chiefs. He does not know that we're playing this game,
Okay, interesting.
but it's the game of who arrives at practice first, because he's the first guy on the field every single day.
Interesting. Okay.
And I've now started playing the game, and I post a picture every day about who got to the practice field first, me or Vitaly Gurman. And so far, I have only won 3 times.
That's awesome.
I have
I
your
love that game.
push
And that's
notifications
like-
turned on, I think. Why do I not? I
mean,
feel like
it's-
I've missed out
Because
on
you
this.
have muted the name Vitaly
Quite possible.
Gurman.
And I always
Gorman.
I started kind of noticing this I noticed during the rookie minicamp. He's out there every day. And then I just started keeping track a little, like maybe 4 or 5 practices ago.
Interesting.
So
I
this,
wanted to,
this entertains me. And I mean, hopefully he's listening now and knows
He does
that
listen.
we're playing.
Yeah. He's the number one
But right
Vitaly listener of the zone.
I am currently losing a game 8-3 against a guy who doesn't know that we're playing.
Well, look, he's playing a different game, which is impress the Chiefs.
Technically, I guess it's 7-3 because I considered the indoor practice a push.
Yeah,
So
that doesn't count.
technically,
doesn't count.
I
Yeah.
probably would have won that day because I was ridiculously early.
It's soccer. You're 7-3-1.
I think at the very least you can make that a draw.
He's 7-3-1. Sorry, you're 3-7-1.
We'll call it. It was definitely a push.
Yeah.
There was
wanna
no
do,
money paid out that day.
Wanted to give a shout out and pass along. Up in your neck of the woods. I know not the same county, but Platte County Sports
Minnesota.
Commission. Yeah, that's right. Platte County Sports.
Typical Leewood types out here.
He's the one that said that. I just said up in your
Saying-
neck of the woods.
Yeah,
he said that.
Platte County.
Believe me, I've got friends in Platte and Clay County.
I've got
that-
Platte friends.
There are
No.
parts of Platte County that are further away than the studio or St. Joe from my house.
But also, I've got plenty of friends up in that area that think I live in Oklahoma.
But
Like, well, we would head down there,
Exactly,
but
yeah.
we're not ready. We're not ready to take a weekend trip down to Oklahoma. Is the dirt orange around where you like? Okay, thanks, guy. But the Platte County Sports Commission Family Sports Festival is going on this
Awesome.
weekend. It's also the tax-free weekend at Zona Rosa as well. Tomorrow from 12 to 3 is the Family Sports Festival. They've got you could try out all the different sports at the Sports Zone. They got autographs with Slugger, Casey Blue, Casey Wolf's going to be there. Activities, prizes. They'll have a DJ, tons of giveaways as well. And you can stop by the Northland Sports Alliance tent. You can register your kids for all the fall sports and everything like that.
Very
It is
cool.
Going on this weekend, the Platte County Sports Commission Family Sports Festival presented by Dick's Sporting Goods. So that is going on tomorrow from 12 to 3. Tomorrow practice going on for the Chiefs. So you won't be up there. You'll be further north
Exactly.
of that. You'll be in, as Josh would say, Minnesota.
pretty much, yes.
But it was fun when we would take a trip over to Minnesota from River Falls from time to time. You would go west on hey, it's a day off tomorrow. You know what? Let's go tonight to a place in Minnesota. Let's
That
go
was
to
actually when it
Minneapolis.
was the closest to Matt's house. Also, it was in River Falls.
What was a quicker trip, here or River Falls?
I
from your
never,
house?
River Falls before my time, so I never got to
Really?
go to River Falls.
Dang. I've been 3 times.
Yeah.
Twice as a fan.
And once as a player going for a tryout.
Once, yeah, that's exactly right. Yes,
You were Brock Middlebrook.
and that's exactly that was me. And then once as a media member with 810, yeah, in 07 with the Hard Knocks. I was there covering the Chiefs in the Hard Knocks time. So the first episode of Hard Knocks, I'm in the background.
We were enjoying
big
some
deal.
great Hard Knocks stories the other day with Adam Teicher.
Oh, really?
Goodness,
Yes.
it has a billion of them.
By the way, Hard Knocks starts next week, right?
I think so.
And they put out a promo for Hard Knocks.
Oh, it's fabulous. It's in the cuts for later today.
Oh, it is the whole
you
thing?
wanna- I think we got the whole thing.
Have you
up in
heard
there.
it? Have you heard it
I have
yet,
not,
Matt?
no.
Dan Campbell, it's
No.
excellent.
Then let's hear it right now. Let's not wait for that. We can play it again in the cuts. It's fine.
Sure, yeah,
The
that's
cuts
fine.
are things that we've already played on the air this week anyway,
Absolutely.
or have said on the air. So they have already been broadcast on the station once before the cuts. We have not played this clip yet.
No.
So let's play it for Matt. This was like a preview of the Hard Knocks that's going to start next week with Dan Campbell. It's about 40 seconds or so him addressing the team.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's our core foundation, man, grit. And what does it mean? In a nutshell, I think it means this. We'll go a little bit longer, we'll push a little harder, and we'll think a little deeper and a little sharper. It means we're unbreakable. Like, to me, it means we'll play anywhere. We'll play on grass, we'll play on turf, we'll go to landfill, doesn't matter. And that's what we got to be. That's who we have to be. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to bury you. Let's go to work, man. It's about to be fun. O&D.
Can I admit something shocking to both of you?
You love Dan.
Feel
Dan
free.
Campbell.
I am unironically completely about Dan Campbell. I don't know how this happened, but I love it. He was out there doing up-downs with his team at training camp, and if any other coach did that, I think it would come off as really dorky and try-hard. But I believe that Dan Campbell is holding back tears every time he speaks to his team because it's real for him.
I went from having fun at his expense when he was talking to then now enjoying playing the sound bites from Dan Campbell when he's talking. I also don't believe any of that because most of it's against the CBA. So they cannot go longer than any other team. That is, and they cannot play in a
That's
landfill.
true. You're not going very far these
And
days. No.
so that's not going to happen. So most of that is against the I feel like most of that's just talk.
We'll play you
a
on
lot
a
of
field
talk.
that Shakira had a concert on the night before.
It's in a landfill.
The closest to landfill I can think of.
Yeah.
I mean, I've talked to people who know Dan Campbell, and they say he is just like one of the best football people out there. He's a great person. You know, he's the kind of guy you want to root for and everything, and
Yeah.
all these things. I just can't get away from the fact that Dan Campbell seems to me like he's the kind of coach you would go through a wall for if your team is 15-2.
Yeah.
And he is the kind of coach you would stab in the back if you're 2-15.
Yep.
No, he's the coach at 2-15 that you roll your eyes when he's talking to you.
Yeah.
Oh, geez,
yeah.
Here we go
I mean,
again.
it's like, here we go again.
Here we go again with the rah-rah stuff. Oh,
Yeah.
yep, I know. We're total grit, and we're arms and teeth and fingernails, and we're going to come at him like a tornado of, just piss and vinegar. That's what
But-
we're going to be.
And we're all out of vinegar.
They had a little bit of growth last year. If they'd win like 6 games this year, I think that the hype can continue for Dan Campbell. But you're 100% right that if once it's gotten stale, no one's gonna want to hear a syllable of that. But right now, I'm all about restore the roar. I'm rooting for Detroit Lions Super Bowl championships in our future.
He's a much easier person to root for than Matt Patricia, who was the
God, yes.
I'm going to put the pencil in my ear even though my play card is laminated. So that pencil does nothing. It's just going to be there just to show that I'm pretty smart.
Accessory. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to take full credit for the comeback against the Falcons. Well, look what I did in that down 28-3. What you did? Okay, sure. I don't think Dan Campbell's probably walking around. I think Dan Campbell's probably, he is who he is, and that's what he's presenting forward, not trying to recreate somebody else.
And I'll admit I have a bias in this sense, in that I firmly believe that if you're hired by the Detroit Lions, you are probably a terrible head coach. But that doesn't mean he's not a great defensive coordinator and a great. I mean, it just means that they probably hired him for a job that he's probably not going to be suited for in the long term.
Peter Principle, ultimately, and that happens in the NFL, certainly.
Detroit's the king of that.
Yeah, Matt Derrick is. I think yesterday was the 24th anniversary of Barry Sanders retiring early. Yesterday, the day before, sometime.
I know yesterday was the 29th anniversary of Robin Ventura getting his butt kicked.
Yeah, I saw that too by Nolan Ryan. Robin Ventura going.
That was a great moment from my younger days.
I'm going to take on this 40-year-old man.
There was nothing like
who's
that.
then just going to have dad strength and uppercut me as I'm the
nothing like watching an old man
young
just
punk
kick the ever-living crap out of Robin Ventura.
And he told him to get off my lawn, which is odd. So Matt Derrick, Chiefs Digest, is our guest. Okay, so we've had a week's worth of training camp and practices, padded practices, things like that. Do you have I know you've got a lot of observations. Chiefs Digest, all the different practices. Do you have like a bigger observation of what you've seen and maybe a developing theme that you have so far? And then there's about 20 other things I want to get into and talk about. But just in general, like as you've seen these practices and padded practices, is there a theme developing or a bigger observation so far?
I mean, I keep thinking about that. I'm like, what has been kind of the story of this camp, and who's been the star of this camp, who's the MVP, and all these things. I think those are all incredibly hard questions to answer, because by and large, this has been a very quiet, just efficient, organized camp. I mean, there hasn't been, because it hasn't been like there's been a superstar. It's not like, and I think about this in the perspective of Sky Moore, because there's been a lot of hype about Sky Moore, and I think largely deservedly so. But in my time covering the Chiefs, the best rookie outside Mahomes that I've seen was Tyreek Hill. And do I see the same electricity from Sky Moore that I saw from Tyreek? No, it's not the same. I mean, Tyreek was on a whole different planet.
Right.
And that's not a knock against Sky Moore. It's just Tyreek Hill was ridiculous. But, I mean, it's just I mean, and frankly, I mean, this goes on down the roster. I mean, usually every year there's some guys you're just like saying, okay, well, this guy doesn't belong. This guy's overmatched. I don't see a lot of that either. I mean, either this team is really, really good and just loaded, or there's something we're not seeing. That there's just maybe they're just not as good as we think. I mean, I don't think that's the case. But, I mean, it's just across the board. I mean, there's 90 guys out there that I think have looked pretty good. I don't think there's anybody that's looked terrible. I mean, you don't see the offense isn't putting the ball in the field. I mean, defense is making plays. I mean, and that's the only thing I could possibly say is just that I don't know about this team. I don't know about the defense. I don't know anything. I think we need to see them on the field. I mean, I've been impressed, but I think that the theme of this camp so far has been that I don't know if there is a theme.
Because the view of this team is that they're good. And they're going to be one of the best teams, if not the best team in the AFC. Again, I'll stay with, continuing to pick the Bills to win the Super Bowl this year. But Chiefs are right there. Some other teams as well. Because we know that, this isn't this team was bad last year. They're going to be better this year. We've seen the consistency of this team. I preface my thoughts with that because the fact that a couple practices it's Josh Williams. And then a couple practices it's Sky Moore. And then early on, it was Juju and Patrick Mahomes connecting. And then, George Karlaftis has been talked about. The fact that it's been different players that have been discussed at different times, to me, is more encouraging than that could be a bad thing, too, because of the fact that they're already a good team. So then you have different players that are like, this guy stood out, or that guy stood out at this practice, or, Willie Gay, bursting through the hole, Leo Chenal, hitting Ronald Jones the way, that he did, and these different things that we talk about. If this was a bad team, you could go, well, yeah, those guys are showing out, but, look who they're lining up next to. Those guys all suck out there. So are they showing that they're pretty good versus them? And therefore, when they get on a field against a good NFL team, they'll just be okay? Or, okay, these guys are standing out at certain times on a team that's viewed as one of the best in the NFL.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have my roster projection up this afternoon.
Nice.
And it would have been up earlier.
It's ChiefsDigest.com.
It will be at ChiefsDigest.com.
Which you'll tweet about on Twitter at Matt Derrick.
And you should get a notification that you can then share with others.
Certainly
will Vitaly Gorman retweet it?
I hope so. I should probably tag it with a photo.
You should.
And everything. So
tell you what, we'll retweet it, the Sports Radio 810 Twitter account, if I have anything to say about it.
Will he be the first one to read it? I guarantee reading it, you will beat him to that.
You never know.
Yes.
He's got some good fans out there. I will say that.
Nice.
He's got some fans. I've been hearing from his fans. So.
Good for him. But
they are vital.
There you go.
Your roster projection coming out later on today.
But, I mean, and the difficult thing is that, I mean, I've probably got like 58, 59 players that I'm down to. I mean, it's difficult. There's going to be some tough decisions here and there.
I don't think you can play with 58.
You can't. I mean, that's the
thing. Your roster
I mean,
projections are 58 or 59. I think you're cheating.
And, you know, I mean, running back, receiver, defensive line, linebacker, defensive backs. I mean, I've got too many guys at all those spots, and I think I've earned spots.
So I don't want to spoil the whole thing. I want people to go to Chiefs Digest, but do you have them keeping 4 running backs / also a fullback, and therefore only 5 wide receivers, or are you going Burton and then Edwards-Helaire, McKinnon, Rojo, or maybe one of those guys gets cut and it's Pacheco, and then you keep 6 wide receivers, or is it no? Edwards-Helaire, Ronald Jones, Jet, and Pacheco have been so good, they're going with those guys, and therefore a wide receiver, they can only go with 5.
That is, you know, but going into this process, I had in my mind 6 wide receivers, definite. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and maybe 3 running backs. And now that I've gotten into it and put it on paper and I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know, I have to keep 4 running backs for now.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I can keep 5 receivers.
6.
Excuse me, 6 receivers. I'm not sure if I can. So that's a question.
That's going to be one of the bigger decisions that the Chiefs make.
Especially because, I mean, you're keeping 4 tight ends. I mean,
absolutely.
There's no other way around that. But I'm expecting Brett Veach to make some moves because he's got the caliber. He's got the ammunition to do this. So
the running backs in particular are the one thing that I think I can genuinely say I am surprised about the way this position group has panned out. I think running backs are the one at the top of my list because I bought that Ronald Jones was going to be a legit option on at least first and second down. And I felt like Pacheco was going to have a pretty tough road to making the roster. Dave Tobe talked about Isaiah Pacheco being the first guy for kick returns. Every report says that he looks excellent. And I haven't had anybody tell me that Ronald Jones has taken a handoff from Patrick Mahomes. I'm sure, I would imagine that he has at some point.
He has.
But it doesn't seem like he's done a lot of that. So that group in particular, I'm wondering what the mechanic is there.
Well, and this goes to maybe one of the broader themes of camp, which, you know, maybe this is the broad theme, which is that, I mean, the Chiefs can't figure anything out either, which is why there is so much rotation going on. I mean, it's why you are seeing Josh Williams and then Jalen Watson one day. It's a reason why Ronald Jones is the number 2 running back one day, and the next day he's 4th. You know, you got to test it out. You got to see, you know, how all these pieces fit, and you know, and there's some positions. I mean, offensive line is interesting in the sense that just with the backups, that it's the left guard, center, and right guard rotates every single day with the number 2s. I mean, it's a different player. I mean, because, you know, between Austin Ryder, Nick Allegretti, and well, it was Mike Caliendo there for a while. Now they've rotated some other guys in there too, but I mean, it's just a different face. I mean, all 3 of those guys are playing all 3 positions. I mean, it goes back to the cross training and everything. But again, cornerback's been one of those spots. Defensive line's been another one of those spots where you're seeing some guys. I mean, we've seen Mike Dana kicking inside quite a bit, which is maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but it goes back to, once again, I mean, they're trying to figure out if you're going to keep an extra defensive end over a defensive tackle, well, some of those guys are going to be able to kick inside every once in a while. I mean, it's across the board, but Pacheco's a great example because Isaiah Pacheco, coming into this camp, I was probably about 75% he's making the squad. And then once you saw, especially the fact that, you know, what he's doing in returns and what everything, I mean, he's 99%. And that could change in a heartbeat. I mean, if this kid goes out and fumbles against Chicago on a kick return, I mean, that's just all it takes. I mean, Corey Coleman, I had probably 90% to make this roster.
Really?
3 days ago.
Really?
Because he was catching everything in sight. He was on special teams. He was just having a tremendous camp. And it looked like he was maybe the top contender to be the punt returner. And then goes out, fumbles a kick on the first punt return, and then Dave Tobe goes to the podium and absolutely buries him underground. And, I mean, that's just how quickly things can change. I mean, you know, Devin Key was the same way last year. This was a guy that, you know, had such an incredible camp, was tremendous, and we were all putting him on the 53. And then, you know, the young kid goes out there and has a rough game and needs a hug, and all of a sudden, it's not there anymore. I mean, that's just how quickly these things can change in camp.
The Dave Tobe might have the biggest say in whether they go 6 receivers and 3 running backs / 1 fullback, or they go 5 receivers and 4 running backs / an extra fullback as well. Because Juju, MVS, McColl, and Sky Moore are on the team. There's 4. If you're getting to 10, running back room, including a fullback and also wide receivers as well. If you're getting to 10, Burton's on the team. They love a fullback. I can't imagine Andy Reid just saying, well, we want to keep Pacheco
making this team.
Yeah, so Burton's on the team along with Juju, MVS, McColl, and Sky. There's 5. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on the team. There's 6. So now you got 4 spots left.
Who's your number 2 running back? Who's the running back you're second most confident in?
That's what I'm getting to. So you got Jet, Rojo, and then Pacheco. That would take you to 9 if you went that route. So you'd have 1 spot left at wide receiver. Or is there a chance they move on from Rojo or Jet and Pacheco becomes Jerick McKinnon? Edwards-Helaire and Rojo are sort of redundant. And therefore, if they needed somebody, then maybe Derek Gore can make it on the practice squad. And if Rojo is let go and then somebody goes down and you need that, you slide Derek Gore up from practice squad or something like that. Is there a chance that one of those top 3 we're talking about, Edwards-Helaire, McKinnon, and Rojo, may not be on this team when cut-down time comes?
There's definitely a chance. And Rojo stands out, and I don't know how much of it is simply because we're tainted a bit by the past of the CJ Spillers and the Carlos Hydes, that come through here and either don't end up making the squad or get traded, because that just seems too natural. I mean, and you certainly know that there's teams around the league that are going to lose some starting running backs, and one thing I always say is that teams overvalue their own running backs, especially some young guys. I mean, that's why I say, hey, Derek Gore has been around the league for a little while, was very impressive with his team. But could you get a Derek Gore through waivers on the cut down to 53 and onto a practice squad? Yeah, because there's probably a Derek Gore on every single team, and every single team thinks that they have Derek Gore or better.
And every single team is going, I hope our Derek Gore makes it to practice squad. And everybody's like, yeah, you can have him on practice squad.
Yeah.
We got our own.
And you know what? The reality is Derek Gore may be the best Derek Gore there is in the league. But Rojo's not.
He's the best. He's the best Derek Gore in the world. He's his only person. There's only one of him in the world.
I think he's the best running back named Gore in NFL history.
But the one thing Ronald Jones has that Derek Gore doesn't, he's got a 900-yard rushing season. I mean, he's got that experience. So there's a team in the league that, hey, they're going to lose their running back. They're going to lose some depth. And suddenly guys like Rojo become very valuable. And that's why, and once again, maybe it's the Carlos Hyde experience kind of squeezing in again. But it seems like with the depth of that group, it is going to be hard to keep them all.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, based on what we've seen, and once again, I mean, this is counterintuitive to my whole teams overvalue their running backs. I'm not sure, especially if he has a good preseason. I'm not sure Isaiah Pacheco makes it to waivers.
Well,
so that's a guy you could probably have to keep.
The running back thing is so interesting to me, and we'll take a break and come back and talk about a few other things as well. But it becomes interesting because Edwards-Helaire is there. They're not moving on from him. And people like Pacheco. I thought McKinnon should have got more opportunities last year, before he was injured. And I'm glad he got the opportunity in the playoffs to show what he could do and average 6.5 yards per touch for this team and be a number 1 running back when the opportunity called upon him. And then there's Ronald Jones. So they've got a healthier running back room to me, or more talented running back room than they did going into the 2019 season when it was Damian Williams and Darwin Thompson and Carlos Hyde and then LaShawn McCoy, ultimately. And they cut Carlos Hyde and took a $900,000 dead cap hit.
Traded him. I don't remember what they got back. But
right. Yeah, exactly. But they moved on. Yeah, you're right. They traded him. I keep saying they cut him, but they traded Carlos Hyde, and they took a $900,000 dead cap hit. Moving on from Ronald Jones would be a $750 dead cap hit. So they've proven in a year where they had less talent that they would take the $900,000 dead cap hit to get something back.
Hey, right. $750, $900 for a draft pick is actually not a bad deal.
To get something back, that they've done it before with less talent when they've got Edwards-Helaire and McKinnon and they really like Pacheco. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if they say, we got to keep this 6 wide receiver, that Corey Coleman or Josh Gordon or something, because Justin Watson feels like maybe that he's going to be on the team because of the love that Dave Tobe was giving him. So if they're going these 4 and then Justin Watson is our Marcus Kemp, we've got to come up with a number 6 or we trade Ronald Jones or Jet. And Pacheco can be what Jerick McKinnon was, and we get a draft pick back, or somebody that's on the end of somebody else's roster, and it's like a Pat Anger for Charvarius Ward, something like that.
That's exactly.
Who's Pat Anger?
Well, who was the Anger that was traded
Parker.
for?
Parker Anger, and the Chiefs got Martinez Rankin back for Carlos
He
Hyde,
was
by the
so
way.
close, though.
Martinez Rankin?
Yeah. Martinez Rankin for
And
Carlos Hyde.
he got Anger right, so I wasn't going to say anything.
Parker Anger for
Devon Angerer. I got it. Actually, it was Richard Angerer.
That's right.
Seymour. So I've said Richard Seymour instead of Richard Sherman today.
A lot of Freudian slips.
And Pat Angerer for Parker Angerer. It was close.
And Sigmund Freud. Sigmund is not technically his first name.
Damn, that's a good call. It's probably
It's like
Jeff
Sigismund.
It's Jeff. It's like Mike. It was
There's like an
Sigmund.
extra IS in the middle of it, but his middle name is Shlomo. So
Sigismund Shlomo Freud.
Sylvester Morris was. But his nickname was Shlomo. All right, so that's going to be it to see how those 10 players stack up. Because do you think Watson is sort of like, if we look at the 4 wide receivers, Juju, MVS, McColl, and Sky, if there's one more and only one spot left, Dave Toub has a pretty decent, weight for deciding the end of the roster guys. It seems like he really likes Justin Watson.
Yeah, I mean, to me, looking at the roster right now, it's the top 4 that have separated themselves. And then you have Justin Watson. And then you got a bunch of other guys.
Yeah.
So to me, I mean, Watson, I think, is pretty much, once again, it is in the, as long as nothing happens in the preseason that changes things dramatically, I think he's nailed down that number 5 spot.
And also, if there's a bunch of other guys that haven't really surfaced or shown that we got to keep this guy, well, then you probably just go with the 4 running backs.
But again, I mean, it comes down, special teams plays a huge role because, I mean, if you need a punt returner, if you've decided that hey, maybe Sky Moore and Toub's talking about Trent McDuffie. Maybe those 2 guys are going to play too much that you don't want, and you're not going to have McCole Hardman returning punts. Well, all of a sudden, maybe Corey Coleman is your guy. If you've got enough special teams players around that you don't need that 6th receiver to play special teams, maybe Josh Gordon makes a case.
Or it makes Pacheco and McKinnon more valuable to not trade away because McKinnon was a good special teamer last year.
There you go.
And Pacheco they certainly like in that area as well.
And to Josh's question earlier made me think about, who is the number 2 running back on this team? I can't really make a case for that right now, but I can make a case that one of our perceptions coming into this, which was generally, hey, this might be a work, load share between Clyde and Rojo, that maybe it's like 50-50. Right now, I mean, I would say that it doesn't matter who the number 2 running back is. Clyde's going to get 75% of the work.
Yeah.
I mean, he is definitively the guy.
My prediction is that the number 1 running back is Edwards-Helaire. The number 2 running back is Ronald Jones. The 3rd down back is Jerick McKinnon. But if Edwards-Helaire goes down, McKinnon becomes the number 1 running back, and Ronald Jones still stays at number 2. That's my prediction.
And maybe Isaiah Pacheco leapfrogs them all. Who knows?
Could be.
I mean, it's
or maybe he's just
anybody's guess to me at this point.
Or maybe he's a fun first 10, 11, 12 days of Camp Darling, and at the end of preseason, we're like, oh, yeah, remember when everybody loved Isaiah Pacheco? But
it's always possible.
There's too many people that have talked about him.
Bless his heart, he is not Jesse Haynes, though.
Yeah. Well,
he's the real deal.
Bless his heart or Jesse Haynes' heart?
Bless Jesse Haynes' heart.
I agree. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back, and or Bobby Scipio. Different position, but
that was a great conversation this week about Bobby Scipio.
You had a great conversation about Bobby Scipio at practice.
Yeah, because as Teicher was telling us, they had no idea that Bobby Scipio existed. I mean, the only reason that everybody was at camp thought he existed was because just how bad he was. And then they watch Hard Knocks, and all of a sudden, this guy's the second coming of Randy Moss, and they're like, "Are they watching the same practice that everybody else is?"
No, they're cutting it up for TV.
Right. Yeah.
We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. I want to talk some defense with Matt Derrick and look at a positional group in Chiefs pass to see how it ranks maybe with this year's group. We'll do that next.
Take the show with you by listening live on 810WHB.com, in the 810 mobile app, or by subscribing to The Zone wherever you get your podcasts. Jason Anderson.
Let's go next to Matt Derrick. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Patrick. Good to see you.
Good seeing you.
Hey, you're working with a new center now.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he broke up. I don't know if that's just me or...
Matt, we got you?
Weekdays from 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you, Josh Brisco, Beards, Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest joining us here in the zone. Heading up until 2 o'clock, we'll talk with Daniel Lust at noon. He is the co-host of the Conduct Detrimental podcast, also a New York Law School professor, and the latest on the Deshaun Watson saga and appeal and case with the NFL. We'll get his thoughts on that, and then we'll talk with Trevor Sikkema coming up at 1 o'clock from Pro Football Focus. Looking forward to that conversation of a lot of offensive stuff I want to get into with him. I want to talk defense with Matt Derrick because, you know, we've talked for how long about how bad the linebackers have been for this team yearly. Like, all right, linebacking core. It was like DJ, you know, and then who? And then you had Hitchens and Wilson, and it was like, you got to get through it. You know that they're not going to be. What did Stan Weber say? That Hitchens was really good at tackling the guy 4 yards downfield when they signed him from the Cowboys. And it said, look, Hitchens is going to be the guy that he'll be there, and he will wrap the guy up, and he'll tackle him after he's 4 yards down the field. That's what Hitchens is going to do. He's going to be a leader that puts everybody in the right spot, but difference maker, no, that's not him. He's being paid to be that, but ultimately he's being paid to be somebody that can then take control of the defense as the linebacker. As we look at this group, so much praise for Nick Bolton and what he does. And Willie Gay, who is incredibly athletic and wants to lead the linebackers in interceptions this year. If this linebacking core looks anywhere near what we hope it could be with those two, and maybe even throw in Chenal as a guy that runs downhill and can't really run backwards yet, as Spags was talking about. How far back do you got to go before you remember a pair of linebackers playing on the same field that were like, yeah, that's a real, honest strength for the Chiefs, and it's not a average spot or a deficiency that you just had to sort of play through. Like an actual strength for the team could be linebackers.
It's been a while, and I'm kind of probably excluding some 3-4 combinations because
I'm doing that because you had outside linebacker like Justin Houston and D Ford. I mean,
well, you had Justin Houston and Derrick Johnson on the field. Okay,
yeah.
But I don't. Yeah, Justin Houston was down.
Houston's,
I mean, it was the line. He was defensive end. I mean, he was a pass rusher. So
in those with that, I would look at the two middle linebackers, which was DJ and Ragland, or Ramik Wilson or Josh Mauga. Or when DJ tore his Achilles, James Michael Johnson and Mauga.
I mean, I'm going. I mean, when you have two, strong middle of the field type linebackers or sideline to sideline guys, I'm going back a ways. I mean, my memory is probably faulty, so I'm probably missing somebody. But man.
Here are the linebackers that started the most games that were actual linebackers, not right outside linebacker that's a Justin Houston or left outside linebacker that's D Ford, actual linebackers. So going back, Hitchens, Wilson, and Gay in 2020, but it was really Hitchens and Wilson. Hitchens, Wilson, and Ragland in 2019. Hitchens, and then when it was a 3-4 before Spags, Hitchens and Ragland, DJ and Ragland, DJ and Ramik Wilson, DJ and Mauga and James Michael Johnson because DJ's Achilles.
You say his name like a cartoon.
Mauga.
Yeah.
I thought it was Mauga.
Yeah, I kind of always you add a syllable that makes it
I like
sounds
adding
like
syllables. Ooga shot. I like adding syllables, like angerer. I'm angerer than you are.
You sound like the sound effect that a cartoon character makes whenever he sees a female cartoon character.
I say Josh, the linebacker.
There you turn into Spags
Mauga,
at the end.
James Michael Johnson, DJ and Akeem Jordan, DJ and Belcher, DJ and Belcher, DJ and Belcher, DJ and Demario Williams, DJ and Demario, DJ and Donnie. Second run. Donnie.
But
that was 2007 Donnie.
Yeah, I know.
Not late 90s Donnie.
Yeah.
DJ and Kavika Mitchell. DJ and Kavika Mitchell. Kavika Mitchell, Scott Vegeta, and Sean Barber. This before DJ now. Maslowski, Fajita, and Barber. Maslowski, Fajita, and Marvicus Patton. Now, I had to add that because there's a V before the C. Marvicus. Donnie Edwards and Marvicus. Donnie Edwards and Marvicus. Patton, Marvicus, and Edwards. Donnie Edwards, Wayne Simmons, and Anthony Davis. It's back in 1998 now. 97, Donnie Edwards and Anthony Davis. And 96, Tracy Simeon and Anthony Davis. And I keep going back.
Yeah.
Right? And we can keep going back. Because even those mid-90s Chiefs teams were, like, it was defensive line. The linebackers were good, but, like, the real true strength. Like, they weren't a deficiency, right? Because we've seen so many Chiefs defensive teams where it's like, outside of DJ, good God, the linebackers. Oh, good luck with that. And even after DJ, it's like, yeah, Hitchens and Wilson, I mean, they're fine. Like, Wilson will come up and hit you, but is he a guy that you're going to say, you feel good at your linebacker spot, especially when they were paying him $18 million combined against the cap in 2020. Like, it's not only talking about what Bolton and Gay can be, it's talking about what they could be compared to what we've seen in a long time.
I mean,
on
the
a Chiefs defense.
ceiling is quite high.
Yeah.
I mean, the floor I mean, I think the floor is probably some of those better combinations. I mean, I would think you would feel pretty good if you thought you were getting Donnie Edwards and Marcus Patton out of these guys. I mean, if you told me that was just the floor that you were going to get, I mean, I'd take that to the bank right now. But I mean, you do feel like the ceiling is quite a bit higher, especially, I mean, to me, because of just what Nick Bolton did last year. I mean, the numbers were fantastic. I mean, rookies just don't normally put up those kind of tackle numbers. I mean, that's pretty good. And Gay, I mean, we're still kind of everybody has seen the potential. I mean, the athleticism is absolutely there. We just haven't seen it for a full season yet.
Yeah.
And you know what? I mean, it is not uncommon for young guys, for it to be year 3.
And he was also a guy that when he was brought in, it was like, it's going to take some reps for
he
Willie
was
Gay to get this
a very
thing
raw
going.
football player coming in. I mean, he did not have a lot of college experience under his belt.
In fact,
he talked about that in his presser. Like he kind of by the end of the rookie year,
gave up on it.
Yeah, and which doesn't mean he gave up on trying to be good at football, but I thought that aspect of what he said there was just a sort of harmless honesty that we don't get very
often. I mean, it was exactly. I mean, and I thought it was very truthful. I mean, and the thing is that I think there's a lot of guys that feel that way. And usually the guys that feel that way are usually pretty good players. They're just being hard on themselves. And I think we've seen a lot of those players who eventually do become really good players.
Well, Willie Gay in year 3 to me is more encouraging and a lot of hope from what he's been in year 1 and year 2, because Willie Gay specifically, his rookie year, was already viewed as a guy that incredible athleticism, can run sideline to sideline, but he needs more reps as a linebacker. He needs to sort of the instinctual part of the game. It'll come as he gets more and more reps. Oh, here's a pandemic. And now everything's virtual. And now you're not getting those reps out there on the field. And you're not going through some of those things in training camp and preseason games. And oh, by the way, here you go. Here's the NFL season, and it's Steve Spagnuolo's defense.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those to where it's like, he's like, I just sort of gave up. And I think it's part of I'm giving up in trying to figure out all these different things, and I'm just going to focus on what I know at this point. That's all I can do because I'm way behind on all this stuff. And it's late in the season, and there's no way I'm going to be out there on the field for 70% of the snaps and know all the different plays and what I'm supposed to do. So I've got my package that I'm in there on, running plays, things like that, and that's it. That's what I'm going to know.
Right.
And then year 2, you get more and more acclimated into year 3 where it's like, okay, I got Nick next to me, and he's got everything. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. This is my year to go and lead linebackers in interceptions. I dropped 4 last year, and I also had 2. That's 6 I could have, which would have led the league by 2 in linebackers last year. So that's why I'm incredibly encouraged by Willie Gay, even though the consistency hasn't been there, because he had a unique start to his career when he was already a guy that was like, he needs the reps to play.
And, and it's been probably, I would say, a lack of experience and injuries that have been the biggest obstacles to him the first 2 years. And now, it seems like this entire offseason has been a completely healthy one for him, I think both mentally and physically. He seems in a much better place than he's been the last couple of seasons, and you see that on the field. I mean, you just see him moving with, I think, a great deal more confidence. I think certainly quickness. You're seeing him in the right positions that maybe he wasn't always in before. In their indoor practice the other day, he had an interception against Mahomes in the red zone, in the end zone, and it was a Mahomes no look, and Willie didn't fall for it. I mean, he was right where he's supposed to be, and he makes the interception, and Pat goes, "Hey, good play."
Yeah.
You see that more and more with Willie out there, and I mean that's what gives me pretty good confidence that I think he's going to have a good season. That this could be the breakout year for him.
It matters if you have playmakers on the field, right, both offensively and defensively. But I'm a bigger believer in that eliminating holes rather than acquiring elite players is a bigger deal in building a defense 1 through 11 rather than, okay, you've got 3 amazing players and 8 guys that are just like, so-so, versus you've got 11 guys and there's no real hole, but there's also not, this stud player out there. And that, to me, is what the Chiefs hopefully did in the offseason was you took away some of the deficiencies and the holes that were there, and you went from bad or below average to just average / could be good. And I think you make a bigger impact going from bad to average than you do from good to elite, if that makes sense.
And if we're talking about the one hole that might be there in the linebacker group, and it's not even specific to linebacker because you are going to be in sub packages a lot, it's going to be that strong side backer that's covering the tight end in that situation because Elijah Lee's probably going to start there. I think he's the most experienced. He's got probably the best skill set for it. And going up against Travis Kelce is not the best barometer about how he's going to be against the typical NFL tight end.
Trial by fire, though, man.
But I mean, Elijah Lee, I think is a quality linebacker for a situation like that. I mean, especially when you pair him with the other two guys. I mean, and if that's the role, and if you've got sub packages and you're using, I think they've got some safeties who can do that too. But that's going to be the challenge is, how do you tackle that? Because otherwise I think that, this linebacker group I think is going to be pretty good.
Yep. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back, wrap up this hour with Matt Derrick next.
You're in the zone with Jason Anderson on Sports Radio 810 WHB. The Zone with Jason Anderson.
That's a clown take, bro.
On Sports Radio 810.
All right, Matt Derrick, Chiefs Digest. What time do you think we'll see at Chiefs Digest your first 53-man roster projection?
My goal is 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock today. Okay, so that gives me an hour to do all the stuff around the house that I need to do, and then go to Chiefs Digest.
You can mock and
of course.
ridicule me on Twitter.
Can you just call me and read it to me during that time?
Probably not. No.
What if I still click it?
I can show you to it now. Show you the draft.
Are you not able?
And you can see all 59 people that I still have on the roster.
You're not going to be in a place where you could read it.
I just would like for Matt to read me his stories.
You want an audio book from Matt on his website?
Yeah, I really do.
There will be at least one player that you will say, "I cannot believe that you have that guy in the roster."
Ooh,
okay, wow.
That's a tease.
All right, interesting. Tyreek Hill makes this Chiefs roster, so I cannot believe you've got Tyreek Hill on the roster.
Man, I forgot to edit that.
You idiot.
Seems like an oversight.
Thank you, Matt. Daniel Less next.
Steven.
All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you, Josh Brisco, Beards. We head up until 2 o'clock. We'll talk with Trevor Sikkema coming up at 1 o'clock from Pro Football Focus. Thank you to Matt Derrick, Chiefs Digest, and you can check out Chiefs Digest today's goal is at 3 o'clock to have the first roster projection of the 53-man roster for the Chiefs, 8 days away from their first preseason game against the Bears next Saturday. So NFL, a lot of stuff happening this week in the NFL when it comes to Deshaun Watson and the ruling and the appeal, and then assigning Peter Harvey to be the arbiter of, or at least hear the appeal and look at it from the NFL's side. Joining us now is Dan Lusk, co-host of Conduct Detrimental podcast and also New York Law School professor as well. Dan, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
This is supposed to be the dead zone of sports. I'm like busier than ever. It's wild.
I mean, right? Yes, I would imagine that you have a number of different requests that people have put in for you to come on different shows to give your thoughts and breakdown from a actual, lawyer's perspective rather than sports radio guys going, well, the way I understand it is this, having never studied it or taken a class even around it.
Well, it certainly helps to have a podcast also called Conduct Detrimental. So I am right in the thick of it, for better or worse.
Yes, Conduct Detrimental to the podcast is Dan Lusk, who is our guest here. So let me just start with this. The reaction to the NFL filing the appeal. We know who Roger Goodell has designated to hear that appeal. So your reaction to that, was it expected from you that the NFL was definitely going to appeal, even if this might have extended the timeline and kept this thing in the news for a much longer period of time?
I have the receipts on social media. I said I would be shocked if the NFL did not appeal this, and we were right on that front. I think Deshaun Watson might have slightly underestimated the NFL in that regard, right? There were reports on the table that there was a 12-game suspension that he could have taken, but he, I'm a sports betting guy as much as I'm a sports law guy. A little bit of a parlay, right? He hoped that the judge would give him less than 12 games and also hoped that the NFL would not appeal. Only one of those two things occurred, and now Watson's looking at an indefinite suspension. So I'd say he lost that parlay. That's why we tell people, just do the single game bets. Don't do the parlay.
Don't do the parlay. Come on, parlay is a sucker's bet. Come on, Deshaun Watson, you should know this. So, well, maybe talk to Calvin Ridley about some of the strategies he uses when betting. So the indefinite suspension is what the NFL wants, and they want him to then have to apply for reinstatement. So Peter Harvey has been assigned to the case, designated by Roger Goodell. The assumption is that, he works for the NFL. He's been closely associated with the NFL. This is going to be somebody that Roger Goodell puts in there to say, look, I didn't have anything to do with it. I put this guy in there. Judge Sue Robinson had her, findings. Peter Harvey had his findings. And this is what we're going with, even though it might just simply be somebody that's going to do the bidding of Roger Goodell and put the indefinite suspension, at least a year, so on and so forth. And then that is ultimately going to lead to Deshaun Watson's camp suing, right?
I would think so. I mean, you said something, and I call it like I see it. I'm not on either side of this equation, but I'll say, right, if you had this whole process that you collectively bargained for to appoint an independent judge, right? Okay, so you actually had a retired federal judge. You used her. Okay, but you disagree with her, and who did you appoint? You appointed someone that serves on the NFL's diversity committee. You're appointing someone that was a former attorney general. Now they're a partner at a law firm. I don't know. I think the best person for this would be an independent judge, emphasis on judge, and it's not what we have here. So it's a little bit of dirty pool. I think it's obviously better optics than Goodell himself hearing the appeal. But this isn't much better. Obviously, Harvey has a history of working with the NFL on Ezekiel Elliott's cases in the past. I'll give you a little bit of legal insight. If someone handpicks you to serve as the designee for something, right, and you side against them, rest assured you are never getting another appointment again. And that's why, listen, if this was a vetting show, I would tell you that the NFL is a very, very heavy money line favorite to win this. I don't know how many games. I'd put that over under at like 14.5. But I think that 1 year is certainly in play here.
Visiting with Dan Lusk, co-host of the Conduct Detrimental podcast. So Judge Sue Robinson's findings, we know that the grand jury came back with no true bill. We know that the preponderance of evidence that she used in trying to figure out if he did commit these, acts, she found out that he did. So the even higher level to get to the point of finding if he did this or not. Her investigation or her hearing both the NFL and Deshaun Watson's camp and her findings and what she wrote about versus then the punishment. even if we say, okay, well, the grand jury came back this, and she has a higher threshold, and she found these things, even if we disagree with that, putting it to the side, are you able to weigh those things to what she found to then the actual punishment that she handed down, or was the punishment handed down a lighter suspension than maybe it would lead you to believe based on her findings and building up to what ultimately his punishment was going to be?
So first of all, Jason, I'm very impressed that you knew that angle about the standard of proof. I mean, that's a big thing that we should talk about here, right? That a grand jury with a lower standard of proof, we'll say they had to show confidence that Watson committed sexual assault, we'll say by 25%. It's a standard called probable cause. It's a very low standard. And the judge had a standard that was something called the preponderance of the evidence. It's like 51%, more likely than not. So a judge with a higher standard of proof found that sexual assault occurred when the grand jury did not. So that's interesting, right? Now, as for your particular question, from my standpoint, I would, if Judge Robinson looked at this and said there's no sexual assault and she came back with 0 games, I have no problem with that, right? Who are we to substitute ourselves for Judge Robinson, who heard all the arguments? We're just hearing the second-hand and third-hand, right? A little bit of a hearsay action. But when Judge Robinson finds, in her own view, in her own assessment, that the NFL won on those 4 separate counts of sexual assault, I have a hard time understanding how she says, you know what, I know there were 4 counts, and I know a guy like Zeke and Roethlisberger, those guys got 6 games. I'm not going to worry about the fact that there are 4. We're going to say it's one giant pattern of sexual assault. I'm going to give them 6 games. The way I think is the more troublesome way to look at it, and why I had a feeling the NFL was going to appeal here, why I felt comfortable saying that on Twitter. You take 6 games, and you have 4, at least in Judge Robinson's view, 4 counts of sexual assault. To me, that's basically a game and a half per sexual assault, which in the current modern climate that we are in 2022, that's woefully light. And I think that's even light, for something like the NFL dealt with like 10 years ago with Ray Rice, right? They gave him 2 games back then, and then they got yelled at. They had to be higher. So you look at it that way, a game and a half per sexual assault. Not a shock that the NFL wants to be seen as being harder on women's rights issues. So yeah, that's been my prediction as to why they would appeal and why the NFL does not want to go light on Watson in any way, shape, or form at this point.
It's interesting because Jameis Winston was given a 3-game suspension, and she talked about that. And so when you break it down that way, a game and a half per instance that Watson was accused of, and Judge Robinson found that preponderance of evidence that it was more likely than not that he committed these things. So if it's a game and a half per versus Jameis Winston had one that was 3, so then that would lead you to believe the 12 games, right? If the NFL is like, well, Jameis Winston got 3, and this is 4 times that, we will come to the table and say we're going to offer you 12 because, she may go with 12 because Jameis Winston got 3, and now this is 4 times the amount of things you're accused of. 12 makes sense, but it certainly feels like the indefinite suspension is coming. Why do you think the NFL met with Deshaun Watson and offered 12 when we know that what they wanted ultimately was a year-long suspension and a requirement for him to have to apply for reinstatement?
Well, why they, I think 2 things, and I have a point of indefinite suspension line that I don't think people have really tapped into. But, obviously the NFL doesn't want to see this thing go to federal court and continue this saga on like we saw with the Deflategate. If there's one thing that the NFLPA and the league have in common, there's, as far as I can tell, there's only one. They want this thing over as soon as possible. No one wants to see this go to federal court and get messy, right? And for Watson's purposes, we can get into it, but Watson has a $1 million base salary for 2022. If he fights this up on appeal and he does something that's called an emergency injunction, that's, again, I don't know how much time we have, but the live golfers are trying to do that over there. They're trying to say, hey, we've been issued a suspension by the league, and we want a TRO to prevent, our leagues from enforcing these suspensions. So for Watson's purposes, that could take the suspension all the way, if that's how long this case goes in federal court, into 2023, when Watson is making $46 million for the season. So then all of a sudden, if you have a 6-game suspension, I mean, that's like tens of millions of dollars, whereas now a 6-game suspension is like $300,000. Now, I don't want to lose sight of your question, right? This indefinite suspension. People ask, why is it indefinite? What would require, what would need to happen for Watson to be asked back or allowed back? So, it's a similar suspension to a guy that you mentioned before, Calvin Ridley. Yes, he was suspended for a year, but you read the fine print. It's after a year, he'll have the ability to apply for reinstatement. Same thing that Josh Gordon had once upon a time. I read the reports. What is the NFL looking for? They want all of Watson's cases to be wrapped up. But we don't know when that'll happen, right? There's one case that's still pending in civil court that's scheduled for trial in April of 2023. But if you're really in the weeds of this, there are 30 women that settled their lawsuits or settled claims with the Houston Texans. So they paid out in some undisclosed amount of money, 30 women. Okay, Deshaun Watson has been sued personally himself 24 times. So by my math, right, if someone just wanted to look at this logically with some type of Venn diagram, there's a real likelihood that there are 6 women, right, who were paid by the Texans to settle that have not yet sued Deshaun Watson. So I'm not convinced that Watson's not going to get hit with more lawsuits. And I think that's what the NFL is concerned about, that they want all of his legal cases to be wrapped up. And that's why that indefinite suspension could be pretty worrisome if you're Watson or Browns fans or anyone associated with his camp.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. As while you're suspended, that before you apply for reinstatement, all of a sudden there's new accusations that come out. Well, no, your application is going to be denied. Your indefinite suspension is going to continue. You mentioned something about this taking a while and bleeding over into the 2023 season and looking at the timeline. One of the things that we talked about yesterday and sort of got into a discussion about whether or not Deshaun Watson would be available for week 1. Ezekiel Elliott sued, and he got the temporary restraining order. Tom Brady, the same thing. And that was, did the math that it was 488 days after the NFL gave Tom Brady the 4-game suspension is when he actually served his 4-game suspension. That game number 1 of his 4 games was 488 days later. That thing took a while. But they were suing to have the suspension lessened, right? To get fewer games. Whereas Deshaun Watson, even if he wins in court, he still, and, would he want, and then starting week 7, he would then ask for the temporary restraining order.
So you've tapped into something that I'm having conversations with my, my colleagues in the legal space right now. It's a question as to whether or not again, this is a new disciplinary procedure. We haven't seen this aspect of it. So in the old system, for those that haven't been following, and at the end of this, I might have some betting advice for you guys, and just get ready for this. Just hold me to that. But in the old system, right, Roger Goodell or whoever his appointee was issued the punishment, and then that went up on appeal. So the question was never, hey, what was the first punishment? What was the second punishment? That's a new advent under this 2020 CBA. So there's a conversation happening amongst us lawyers, right, what the argument will be. If Watson takes this to federal court, he would be asking for his suspension to be held in abeyance while the merits of the case works out. So as you pointed out, the Brady case took over a year, right, and that suspension could then carry over into the following year. Sure. Now, there is a reading of, and Watson says, okay, I've been suspended for a year. I'd like this whole thing to be held in abeyance while we fight this out. The NFL in their opposition papers will make this interesting argument, and they'll say, well, listen, you actually didn't appeal the 6 games. You're only appealing the stuff that we're tacking on. So you actually have no say. You're going to be out weeks 1 through 6, and then we can fight over week 7 through, onwards. So I'm of the opinion that Watson, right, is going to argue the whole thing should be held in abeyance. So under that, again, we're getting into the weeds here technically, but I've said, and again, I'm happy to keep the receipts out there, I think there is a realistic scenario that Watson is on the field on week 1. That's what we saw with Brady way back when, right? His whole suspension was held in abeyance. So I'm looking at that week 1 betting line for Browns-Panthers. It's supposed to be Browns versus Baker Mayfield and the Panthers. It's supposed to be a good game, right? Imagine if that game is Watson versus Mayfield. I would think the Browns would be heavy favorites, right? Like a touchdown, 6.5, 5.5. That game is currently a pick'em game. So the sports books maybe need to retain a lawyer because I think there's a decent chance that Watson's on the field in week 1, but those lines certainly don't reflect that.
So the comparison you made to a parlay that Deshaun Watson was placing in the bet with that it was going to be less than 6 games or less than 12 or nothing, and the NFL wouldn't then give him the year suspension and things like that. So if that if he loses that parlay, which we expect the appeal to come back and he's going to get a year or an indefinite suspension. If he does fight this and he gets the temporary restraining order and he's out there week 1 and playing, and this thing goes to the federal court, and then next year or after the 2022 season, it's found that we're siding with the NFL, just as in the Brady case, we're siding with the NFL, and he's suspended for a whole year. Then it's a difference of $300,000 versus $46 million. I mean, that wouldn't just be losing them as well.
I was going to say you're losing your kneecaps at that point.
Yes.
You're in trouble at that point. Yeah. So it's $1 million base salary, and at the time that contract was agreed to, I think people kind of said, well, I guess the Browns and his team, they must anticipate some type of suspension for 2022 because, hey, you can only take away what the money he was making that particular year. The signing bonus is guaranteed. And that contract, I mean, you can talk about backloaded. That contract is like backloaded, right? Like you can't even support the wheels of the truck. There's so much, money on the back end of that contract. So, yeah, I mean, this could certainly backfire. But where my legal mind goes, if I'm Watson's attorneys, and I'm 100% with you, I think the appeal, the NFL is the heavy betting favorite. Federal court, NFL's the heavy betting favorite. You just look no further than the Brady precedent that told you, right, that the NFL as a private organization can come up with their own rules, and as long as the union agreed to it, and it wasn't unfair, they're going to uphold the rules of a private organization. So then, let's say you're Watson's lawyers, right? Watson's paying some of the best lawyers in the country to try to get the best result possible. So if I was Watson's lawyer, I would say exactly what they're doing, right? I'm going to take this case to federal court. I'm going to make this really messy. And then there's the potential for those arguments about potentially, a Bob Kraft who had his own massage allegations, received a 0-game suspension. Those and Jerry Jones allegations, Jim Irsay, we can go make the waters very muddy with these owner-based allegations. So if you try to muddy the waters, then I think you push the NFL to a settlement, right? And the NFL, that's why I put that number very purposefully at 14.5. I think Watson will accept any punishment, truthfully, that is less than a year suspension. He won't take that up on to the federal courts. I don't see a path for him to win at the federal court level. That's why I think he's angling for a suspension. And hey, I won't situation, but either way, I think obviously Watson would have been better off taking that 12-gamer and just getting ready for Week 13. But I don't think that's on the table anymore.
Yeah, I'm in agreement that I think that when it goes to if he sues and it's in federal court, that it'll be the same thing that we found out with Tom Brady, that the NFL is well within their rights in the CBA. Like the courts weren't arguing, did you deflate footballs? It was, did Roger Goodell have the power to suspend you for, deflating footballs or the accusation that's there? And just as the, independent arbiter in Sue Robinson, the Judge Sue Robinson, it's been decided in the CBA that whatever she finds is binding and factual, and that cannot be appealed or disputed after that. So then you're just simply saying, okay, she found that you did these 4 things. That's it. I mean, so you can't go back on those things when you're going into appeal or suing. You can't sue in federal court to say, no, he didn't do those things. Too bad. It's about the CBA and whether or not Roger Goodell and the NFL can come back and then add this on, which you agreed to the fact. And there's nothing written in the CBA. This is where the 6 games things comes in, Dan, is that, my confusion with the judge's logic around the 6 games is that if there was something written in the CBA that it was no more than 6 games, well, okay, well then in federal court, then you could argue that they went above and beyond what they should have, and therefore it was more draconian, and it was something to where the NFLPA and the union did not agree to. But the 6-game standard she was using was that 6 games is the minimum for a violent sexual assault or violence towards women, as opposed to there is no amount of games that's put on the nonviolence. So when she differentiated violence versus nonviolence, I don't know the point of bringing up the 6 games when that's the minimum, when it doesn't say up to 6 games or nothing more than that. She could have gone well past 6 games. She could have gone to 8 to 10 to 12 or whatever, or a year if she wanted to. But the 6 games is interesting. She kept talking about, because there's nothing that says up to 6 games or it can't go past this if it's nonviolent.
1,000,000%. And as Josh knows very well, every time I come on this network, I try to teach people a legal term. That's what we would call a red herring. It has nothing to do with the punishment, right? Deshaun Watson is being faced with unprecedented allegations, right? So for Judge Robinson to try to shoehorn this decision into some precedent, to me, makes no sense, right? Okay, we're talking about the minimum for a violent sexual contact. You're saying it didn't occur here, so why are we even talking about this? This is, to a larger point. If Judge Robinson, again, would have found that no sexual assault occurred, she would have agreed with those grand juries. She came up with 0 games. I have no issue with it. But to me, and I've said this publicly, and again, I'm happy to say it here, I read that decision. I read all 16 pages. I read it a couple times. You get through the first 10 pages, and I read decisions for a living. It looked like Robinson was going for the hammer, going to give a year, whatever she was going to give. And then you get to the end, it's like that meme on Twitter, right? Like someone veering off the highway very quickly. She somehow backdoors her way into 6 games. And that seems to me as if a judge who was just afraid to get appealed on the merits of the case. 6 games is a number that is used all over in NFL circles, right? DeAndre Hopkins, 6 games. Stephen Ross, who just gets suspended as owner of the Dolphins, 6 games, right? All 6-game suspensions aren't equal. But to try to find precedent in an unprecedented situation, I think she was working herself into a hole. So 8 games, 10 games, 12 games, even if you give them 2 games, right? I don't agree with it, but to try to find precedent in a situation where there is none, that's why you pay someone the big bucks to make those hard decisions. And she kind of, she chickened out. She tried to take in a protest on a decision on a case that had no, Ezekiel Elliott's case has no resemblance at all to what we're dealing with Watson. But that's the decision she tried to use, I think, to guide her punishment, which I think was just ill-advised, in my opinion.
Dan Lust is the co-host of Conduct Detrimental Podcast and New York Law School professor. Something popped in my mind when we were talking about the if there's a temporary restraining order, emergency stay, and injunction that would take place, from week 7 on. If Deshaun Watson says, okay, well, we're going through the federal court here, I'm going to be suspended for 6 games. I'm going to go ahead and serve them week 1 through week 6 and week 7. Then I'm going to start fighting because if we win this, then I should be playing right now. What would happen, and maybe this comes down to the NFL deciding, but what would happen if he's granted the temporary restraining order, he plays weeks 7, 8, 9, 10, and then the federal court comes back and says, well, actually, we agree with the NFL that it is a year-long suspension and indefinite suspension. Does he then serve like 3 weeks in 2023? What happens then if he gets to play 3 games this year in this, hypothetical? But yet the federal courts say, well, the NFL was well within their rights and the year-long or indefinite suspension is upheld.
That's 100% right. I mean, and they're not going to call it a year suspension. They'll call it a 17-game suspension.
Okay.
So that'll help make sense of it. But that's, again, if you ask me what I think the most likely scenario is, truthfully, if we want to play this out, I think it's the NFL wins an appeal, right? I do think that Watson takes it to federal court. Separate question as to whether or not he wins. I personally don't think so. But I think the most likely outcome in this is a settlement because you're looking at Watson, right, who does not want a settlement to go anywhere near that $46 million salary in the following year. And the Browns, right, whatever happens, they want this clarity in 2022, right? The Browns over-under win line just dropped from 9.5 to 8.5 with the NFL's the announcement of their appeal. So, I don't know, next year if you have a healthy Watson, a full team, right, you expect that number to be a little bit higher. The Browns have so much talent on that roster. So I don't see a scenario where Watson and the Browns and the NFLPA allow this situation to exist in court for a year. I do think whatever the suspension is, I do think it is done with by the end of 2022. That's at least my prediction on this.
And the number you put on it is 14.5. Now, you said before we let you go there was betting advice that you wanted to give here, so let's do that. Dan Luss is our guest, co-host of Conduct Detrimental Podcast, New York Law School professor as well. What's the betting advice that you wanted to give the listeners?
Another legal term I'll give you guys. It's called the assumption of the risk, and that's when you do things that are very risky, but you know that they're risky. Here it is giving betting advice live on air. So I'm looking at that Week 1 NFL line. It is a pick'em game, at least as of today. I think the sportsbooks are really, truly underestimating the likelihood that Watson is playing in Week 1. He has already said that he would like to take this up on appeal if he gets a 1-year suspension. So could he be in court, while fighting this up on appeal in Week 1, Week 2, right, and putting pressure on the NFL to settle with him because he's playing in national spotlight games for a team in a major media market? Yeah, I think that's possible. And I think him playing, right, is only going to create an advantageous settlement situation. I don't think the NFL wants to see this play out like what happened with Brady. So me personally, right, and you guys can take my advice if you want to, I am looking at the Browns on the road to beat Baker Mayfield and the Carolina Panthers, which is a pick'em game, which seems absolutely absurd.
Yeah. What do you think the line would be if Deshaun Watson was playing?
4.5, 5.5. I think they'd be a decent favorite.
Well, yeah, that's it's good advice because if he does play, they might still win anyway because it is a pick'em. But if he does play, then certainly you're talking about value by being able to get it as a pick'em instead of 4.5. Dan Luss, co-host, Conduct Detrimental, and also New York Law School professor. Dan, great stuff. Really appreciate the time and the information and some of the clarity that comes along with this in what is still muddy waters at this point to see what's ultimately going to end up happening. So, Dan, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Anytime.
Absolutely. There's Dan Luss. Go check out the podcast. It's really good stuff. Conduct Detrimental Podcast. He and Daniel Wallach do a good job. And also, Dan Luss, the New York Law School professor as well, that he thinks a pretty decent chance that Deshaun Watson's playing Week 1 against the Panthers, in that maybe you should lay some shekels down on the Browns to win Week 1 because right now it is a pick'em. They're in Carolina against the Panthers. So it's interesting in that his view is the expectation is that Peter Harvey is going to rule in favor of the NFL in the appeal, and it's going to be an indefinite suspension and having to apply for reinstatement for Deshaun Watson. He's then going to sue to take this thing to federal court, and his prediction is that there will be a settlement before the lawsuit goes through its full course and is decided one way or another. And his over-under is 14.5 games that it's going to be put on. That the NFL is going to say, look, we know you're going to lose in federal court. We know you're going to lose in federal court. Right now you're facing a full season and applying for reinstatement. So, full season, 17 games, or we can settle for 14.5 right now. Go talk to your lawyers. Come back with an answer, because this is the best you're going to get. Because you take this thing longer, it's going to go till next year, and you're going to miss next year, and you're going to miss $46 million. You take the 15-game suspension, you can play the last 2 weeks. And if by some crazy, thing happening that the Browns are in the playoffs, you can play in the playoffs. But if you're suspended for an entire year, you're not playing in the playoffs either. So that to me is where it comes into like a 17-game suspension versus an overall year, is that if he's suspended indefinitely / a year, he doesn't play in the playoffs either. But if he's suspended for 17 games, specifically only 17 games, well, he could then play in the playoffs. If the Browns, they're not going to make it. They probably, wouldn't make it with Deshaun Watson just because of how tough the AFC is this year. What are they, the third best team in that division with Deshaun Watson? So, who knows if they even make it then. But that to me is really interesting. If this thing gets to week 6, if he says, I'm going to have to serve a 6-game suspension regardless, so I'm going to go ahead week 1 through 6 and serve this thing as we are suing in federal court, whether that is in the Southern District of New York or whether we have got this case to be in Delaware, where Judge Sue Robinson is from and has worked and has friends there that, judges that may be deciding this case that are familiar with Judge Robinson. So maybe Delaware might be the most conducive place for Watson's camp to get a favorable ruling. As they go through that and trying to fight to get it down to a 6-game and not a full year, do they get the temporary restraining order or the emergency stay starting week 7, and then in the middle of the season he plays like 3 or 4 games, and then the ruling comes down, and then he's suspended again for the rest of the time? Or he starts in week 7 and plays, and the Browns go and have Deshaun Watson as their quarterback, and this thing continues on into 2023, and he plays the final 11 games of the year, and then maybe even making the playoffs, and then next year would serve an 11-game suspension to start the year if he loses in federal court. So would the Browns rather take an entire year this year or split it up into 6 weeks and 11 weeks next year, which could certainly be a possibility? And it's a question of whether or not Deshaun Watson wants to do that, because you're talking about 11 weeks out of $46 million, or, and 6 weeks of $1 million, or 17 games of $1 million. Obviously, monetarily, it makes more sense for him to take the entire suspension this year. We'll see. But it's going to get muddy because Peter Harvey is going to rule in favor of the NFL, and he's going to give an indefinite suspension because he works with the NFL. He's worked with Roger Goodell for a long time. He's going to essentially do what the Manchurian candidate. He's the one in charge of doing what Roger Goodell would do anyway. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. We'll continue rolling more Zone next.
Want to see more of The Zone? Watch the show live on the Sports Radio 810 WHB Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. The Zone with Jason Anderson.
We're going to kick you in the teeth. All right, and when you punch us back, we're going to smile at you. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off.
Weekdays from 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Thank you to Dan Lusk, co-host of the Conduct Detrimental podcast, New York Law School professor as well. We'll talk with Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, coming up at 1 o'clock. He's also the host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, which covers the NFL draft and college players heading into the NFL. But we'll talk with him about the Chiefs. And he also covered Tampa for a while, the Bucks. So I'm curious his thoughts on the tampering from the Dolphins, in which for 2 years of those 3, they were talking to Tom Brady, quarterback of the Bucks. The other thing that, as a quick aside for that, and we're going to give away some tickets to the 100-year celebration for WHB.
Thursday night. This upcoming Thursday.
It's within a week.
So close.
Less than a week. The quick aside to the whole Brady story, that one of the things I want to bring up with Trevor is, I don't know what the ruling in the CBA, or just in terms of a owner-player, but owners would have to vote on allowing somebody who has an ownership stake in a team to then play. There's zero chance the Glazers would vote for it. There's zero chance Robert Kraft would vote for it, since they were tampering while he was a Patriot as well. I would say there's a pretty decently small chance that the Jets would vote for it, because now Brady, they're going to have to face him twice a year when finally he was out of the division. And I think there's probably a number of other owners that were just like, dude, you spent 3 years talking to him, or you were tampering, you were just, no, we're not starting this trend. We're not going to start this trend. No, we're not going to vote Brady being allowed to play while being, having a stake in the team. So the whole owner-player thing, I don't know how close it actually was to happening, because I don't know that he would have got the requisite number of votes from owners to approve him playing out on the field.
Yeah, I do think that there is some world where maybe it's even a year removed for Brady, where if you're the Bucks, you go, okay, well, if we approve this, we'll get there first and third. Okay, Tom, you win again. The precedent there is basically useless, because when is this going to happen again? I do think that you would have teams voting in their own self-interest, where if you're the Bills and the Jets and maybe the Patriots, you would be like, no, and I'm going to get all of my friends to get behind me on this one, to tell you to bleep right off because this loophole was not here for you. But
that's the thing, is they might vote just because, you beat us to it and you're doing something. No, then we're not going to allow you to do it first.
Or if it just hangs around long enough, do you want to be the group of people that now publicly have prevented Tom Brady from returning to your sport? I think that the closed door meetings that don't get reported on from that week would be fascinating.
Well, he can return. He just has to sell his stake in the Dolphins. He could return and play if he wanted to. I don't know. Would Clark Hunt vote for it? Would he be okay with Brady being a player owner with the Dolphins?
Honestly, the Chiefs might be one of the only teams that would have some precedent for that, because Patrick Mahomes could legitimately be in this position before too terribly long.
It's a good point. The next contract for Patrick Mahomes is actually going to give him a percentage of the Chiefs.
It might just be and hey, also, we haven't knocked down Old Kaufman yet, which is what it will be called by that point. Do you just want to live there? We can renovate. We'll pay for it. It can just be your castle. You can just live in Kauffman Stadium.
We can actually build it like a castle.
Yes. We'll fortify the walls.
There will be a moat.
You can have archers up in the. You gotta have an archer at the top of the crown board.
That's exactly right.
Think about that. Not a sniper, an archer. It's medieval here.
You will have a moat with a drawbridge.
Yes, have to.
Based on anybody that's he or Brittany running out for some groceries. That you got to crank that drawbridge down so that they can leave, and then who goes there?
They won't need a catapult.
It's Killer Trav.
They won't need a catapult because Patrick Mahomes can just throw things. So that is an expense you could cut down on.
That's true.
But the drawbridge is must have. The moat is must have. You have to have alligators in the moat. I think that's obvious.
Announce yourself, trespasser. It's Gehrig.
It's Gehrig.
It's me again. I actually just ran out to get the mail for him. It's right here, man. They could do that, yes.
I think they should do that, is what I would argue.
I would really like to hear the rest of the Dolphins ownership group weigh in on this.
Yeah.
You know.
The Williams sisters.
Fergie, Mark Anthony.
Mark Anthony's out there.
Venus and Serena.
Yeah.
Where do you guys come down on this penalty for the owner?
They should just be the ones They should have a podium, put them all down at a desk like they you do with draft picks. You know, like coach, GM, first round draft pick. Just give me the Williamses. Give me Mark Anthony. Who's the other?
Fergie.
Fergie.
She's actually got the highest percentage now.
Does she really?
Yeah, she's the highest percentage ownership stake in the Dolphins while he is suspended.
That's shocking to me, actually. How much power do you think Fergie has right now? Think about this. Follow me here. You know, whenever like the president goes under for a medical procedure or something, you know, power transfers over to the vice president. Or both of them now are on to number 3, 4, 5. How far down the list do you get before
designated survivor?
Before you get to a designated survivor, before you end up in an action movie, how many steps do you go? I don't know. But what if Fergie right now is like, we're renaming our team. We're going to become the Miami Fergies. Could anybody stop her? Does she have that sort of authority?
The Black-Eyed Dolphins.
Yes, that's also very good.
What if
Can I sign Will.i.am to play the slot?
She just steps in and demands that Mike McDaniel is fired.
What? Could she fire him?
Like, he's gone. You know what? He said that he wasn't a big fan of the music. He's gone. Sorry. I am in charge right here.
And I'm hiring Eric Bieniemy. Boom.
See ya. Toast. Done. Okay, well, you can certainly go. Like, I don't even know who the GM of the Dolphins is right now that I should know.
I want to
they
say
made
Chris
the move.
Greer, but I feel like that might not be right.
Well, either you go or Mike goes. Your choice. Chris Greer? Chris Greer, nice show.
Got
it's
him
not
one.
Will Greer, who I would have probably called him Will Greer.
That's right, yes.
Quarterback from West Virginia. I have had a stellar few days when it comes to names, and none of them I've gotten wrong in terms of Devon Dotson. Nailed that one. Let's see. Parker Anger was Pat Angerer. Richard Sherman was Richard Seymour. Josh Mauga was Josh Mauga.
I think if he would have been a better player, that might have ended up being the thing you
Moose.
Is the equivalent? Yeah, the Moose equivalent.
Yeah. So Chris Greer.
Do you think that you are having a bad name week, or do you think that eventually Corey just got so acclimated to all of your mistakes that they stopped correcting you?
No. This is a bad name week when it's typically already which is really bad because just an average name week is that you're getting about 10 things wrong. I did go 8 shows in a row without one name being in because I was keeping track of it. I was on fire.
We get one
and
of the
now
whiteboards.
You know what this is?
Days without Jason getting a name wrong. 0.
You know what this is? This week is now the regression to the mean because it's the back of the baseball card. It's like, well, just look at the back of the baseball card. This is how many names he's going to get wrong in a week. And now it's like, see, I told you he's going through a slump right now. He can't hit the fastball.
Large sample size. That's just
D. Brown. You throw a curveball, he can hit it. Fastball, nope. And it's the exact opposite of Pedro. Yeah, you can kill a fastball, but throw him some off-speed stuff. Oh, he's terrible.
You're nailing Giannis Antetokounmpo. You've got Udoka Azubuike 100% of the time, but then all of a sudden you call Chris Greer Will Greer, and it's like, well, that's just, I guess it's just Pat Angerer, huh?
Pat Anger, you mean Parker Anger? I was close.
Yeah, no.
I was close, man. Come on. Did you call him Wayne Simmons or Wayne Simeon? I'm not sure. It was Wayne Simmons. He was the linebacker with Donnie Edwards. Everybody knows this.
Wayne Brady.
It's Dwayne Wade. He's Wayne. Oh.
Wade. Hold on.
Wade
His
Jones.
name, of course, is Wade Jones.
Wade Jones.
Right?
Yep, it is absolutely right. The Miami mayor introducing Dwayne Wade after they won the championship before LeBron.
His name is Beards. You can add that to the cuts if you want me to go find the. I think it's like a Miami city commissioner or something.
What would she do? He is
I'll
fierce.
send it to you, Beards.
He is this. He is, of course, Wade Jones.
This is a Lebitard Show
Dwayne
staple,
Wade.
of course, because
Dwayne
it's all
Wade.
happened in Miami.
Oh, that's right.
It is. I have heard them play that audio 1,000 times.
Yeah, it's Wade Jones.
I don't know if I've ever seen the video. I'm watching it on mute right now.
Good for you.
And it is. I can hear the echo, and her body language is hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's give away some tickets to the 100-year celebration coming up less than a week. It is Thursday, August 11th at the Midland Theater, and it's going to be a great night, incredible night of celebrating sports and entertainment and broadcasting. St. John and Dustin Colquitt, they will be emceeing the night. All the proceeds go to just 4 incredible charities: Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Victory Project, ALS Association of Kansas City, and Sharewaves. We'll be giving out the first ever Jerry Green Broadcasting Scholarship and a number of other cool things as well. What do you want to do, Beards? Huh? What do you want to do here?
Well,
Somebody call in and sing?
No.
Okay.
Before that, I was going to say, if you're watching on our Twitch or Facebook, I put a comment on there saying we've got some tickets we can give away there as well. Leave a comment. I'll be able to message you if we pick you to win.
What about the YouTube?
YouTube's a little different. I don't think I can direct message you on there.
Oh, I
So
see.
I put just DM me on my Twitter at BeardsMcFly if you're watching on YouTube and you want a chance to win some tickets.
Okay.
And then we'll reach out if we pick you to win.
So how are we selecting these commenters on Twitch and Facebook and YouTube?
Just however I feel like it.
Comedy, Lifetime Achievement Award, good joke, compliment me. Lots of ways you can get there. Kind of Beards' choice. You got to play to Beards' sensibilities.
Get a name right.
Simply one.
Any name right puts you in the running of being able to win these tickets.
It does, absolutely.
It's one of the reasons why I never win anything. Like, you can win the lottery, just get one name right. I'm out. All right, so.
But here we're just good to do whatever caller number we want.
Okay, let's. Great. Whatever.
Let's pick a different number than 8 or 10 or 400. What else have we talked about today? What else could we?
Let's see. What's Chris Bubich's number?
Matt is having a hard time cutting his roster projection down, so caller number 53.
Yep, we can go that route. We could go number 50 for Bubich.
Cool, that's good. That one's also
What about
good.
35 for Hosmer? He returned last night.
Yeah, I like that also. I like all those. Let's give away 35, 50, and 52.
It's a lot of ways we can go.
Start answering the phones, Beards. Gonna have to do a lot of. Sorry, you're caller number 4.
Well, we know Wade Jones, number 3. Caller number 3. There we go.
That's too low of a number.
Dwayne Wade was not. Wade Jones wore number 72 in high school.
It's a caller number 72.
So right tackle. That's what he was. What number was Parker Angerer?
That's also a very high number.
It was a very high number.
It was a very high number. He was also a lineman. Beards, we found out recently you were wearing a 44 in high school, right?
I did.
Caller number 44. Does that work for you?
How about caller number 8? 4 and 4 together.
We're not doing 8 again.
I was looking up because we got Parker and Pat Anger.
Charvarius Ward, number 35.
35, yeah, that's right.
Oh, look.
Number 8.
8. There we go. Caller 8 it is. We're done.
All right, we're done. Caller number 8, 913-3-810-810. We'll take caller number 8. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back, and we'll continue rolling. You know, we never got into the actual tangible takeaway from last night's game as opposed to the Eric Hosmer stuff.
I'm excited to learn what this is because I don't know.
We were going to do that in the second segment of the first hour, but then we ended up just doing other things, which is shocking. Yeah. So we've got a little bit of time in the third segment here that I want to at least put that out there to solve that riddle. And then we'll talk with Trevor Sikkema coming up at 1 o'clock. More Zone next.
Follow the show on Twitter at J810Anderson, at JB Brisco, at Beards McFly, and at Sports Radio 810. You're in the zone with Jason Anderson
To be honest, I didn't even know who Jason Anderson was.
on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
All right, so something tangible from last night's game, and a couple of other things I want to get into after Trevor Sikkema comes up at 1 o'clock. Chris Bubich, who the first inning looked like it was going to be a rough outing. But then he ends up, going 6 innings, giving up only a couple of runs. And in his 12 starts since he was called back up, so the first 5-6 games, whatever it was this year when he was bad, he got sent down, 12 starts since being called back up, he's averaging 5 2/3 innings pitched, so he's pitching into the 6th inning, 3.76 ERA, 29 walks, 57 strikeouts, so, 2-1. Sub-4 ERA in 12 starts for Chris Bubich. And if you look at his career outside of those starts before he got sent down this year, so all of his games and then since being called back up is a 4.2 ERA. It's not bad.
Listen to all the live.
WHB Kansas City.
All right, we continue right here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Jason Anderson with you. We head up until 2 o'clock. We got the cuts before the show is over. No press conferences today for the Chiefs, but a lot of that stuff going on the last week and a half or so. Let's talk some football, some NFL football from Pro Football Focus. Trevor Sikkema joins us here in the zone. Trevor, what's up, man? How are you?
I am doing great. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us as well. I want to talk some Chiefs with you and some NFL as well, but curious to your reaction, around there in Tampa and around the Bucs and things like that, along with Pro Football Focus. But what's your reaction and takeaway from the Miami tampering investigation that resulted in the 2 draft picks? Obviously, it impacts New England. It impacts Tampa as well, where Brady played for both those teams while the Miami Dolphins were in contact with them. What's your takeaway and viewpoint of what the NFL found and what Miami was doing?
Yeah, I mean, when this report first came out, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. It's not that I didn't think that it was true. It's not that I didn't think that it had any validity to it. I just didn't think it went as far to say, like, yes, this almost happened. And so I was very skeptical about the story when it came out initially, months ago, as we were kind of talking about this. And now, obviously, an NFL investigation finds out that it was actually pretty serious. And, it's crazy to think about that. The whole plan of what was reported of Brady, being a potential owner of the team and playing for the team and then courting Sean Payton as well, like trying to form this super team like I feel like we actually see in basketball all the time, right? It feels like the shifts of power will go one way or another drastically when a team can get one or two of the right pieces or go about something in a really aggressive way. And we've seen it turn to championships. Well, it felt like that's what the Miami Dolphins were doing with this whole strategy. And look, I said the whole time I was kind of skeptical about how true it would be. But if there's any player in the NFL that would be able to pull something like this off, it would be Tom Brady. So it doesn't shock me now that we have been told that this is something that happened, that Tom Brady was at the center, that he is about the only player in the NFL that holds that much power, whose brand alone from his name recognition is something that could be a vital part to an organization, not just as a player, but as an owner and a part owner, and just having as much control as it sounded like the Dolphins were about to give this guy. And I don't blame the Dolphins, right? They had watched Brady beat him up for about 20 years. So yeah, I think that goes into it. But just a crazy story all around of what kind of happened and what we found out.
I was right along with you when it first came out. I'm like, come on, man. An owner, a player, he's going to Miami. Like, it sounded odd because we had never really heard anything about it, and then all of a sudden just comes out like, oh, he was close to signing with the Miami Dolphins, and he was close to being an owner, and maybe playing, and they were going to get Sean Payton and all this other stuff, and then the Flores lawsuit comes out, so it ends the whole thing, and then he decides he wants to come back, but is there a relationship with Bruce Arians to where he'll come back only on the contention that Arians is not the coach, and all these other things that were coming out. One of the things that I would have a question about is, let's say this thing happened. Let's say Tom Brady goes and buys in and gets a percentage of the Miami Dolphins as an owner. For him to be allowed to play, what I understand is that the other owners would have to vote on that. And if that's the case, there's no way the Glazer or Kraft or some of the other owners, if they find out that there was tampering going on, that they would then approve for Brady to be able to play. So that part of it, I wonder how close it was to him maybe being an owner/player at the same time.
Yeah, I wonder if there were just more things that they found out about it, right? Because, whenever you're doing something new for the first time, there's going to be a lot of people who aren't happy with it just because they're not benefiting from it, right? They might be ahead of the curve on what is, currently the status quo. So I think there are a lot of teams that would be like, hold on, whoa. How do we stop this? Essentially, like pulling out all of the stops to see, like, okay, we don't want this to happen because this all of a sudden changes the balance of power. It changes how things are done. And I think you're right. I don't know if it would have had to been unanimous or not for them to vote, but I think that there are probably a handful of owners, certainly the Glazers in Tampa and Robert Kraft in New England, who would have said, no, you're not getting away with this. We're not letting you do this. And look, Tom Brady has a way with words, right? He's a persuasive guy, but even with that being the case, I don't think that Tampa, certainly with this tampering stuff that would have come out, would have been, for as much as they like Tom Brady and respect him, and I think that they would have, the Dolphins would have just pulled a fast one on everybody and the whole league would have had their hands tied. A lot of stuff would have gone into this, especially with the ownership part of it. So, I think that it just was the beginning of everything if it would have ended up happening.
Man, Trevor Sikkema is our guest from Pro Football Focus. Let's talk about the Chiefs. This team, one of the favorites the last few years, obviously, 4 straight AFC championship games, and the AFC overall has just bulked up when it comes to talent, and the AFC West as well. Chiefs coming off a disappointing loss to the Bengals and Patrick Mahomes in this offseason. What do you make of, or maybe what are your expectations? What do you think we'll see from the Chiefs offense specifically this year? That there's no Tyreek Hill. We saw them struggle at times for a good portion of the middle part of the season offensively and being able to get anything consistently going. And they were essentially one scoring drive in the second half, one extra scoring drive in the second half away from, going to yet another Super Bowl with the offensive struggles. No Tyreek Hill, but what would you expect? What do you think we'll see from the Chiefs offense in terms of how good they can be, not necessarily strategy or philosophy or how they go about executing certain plays?
Yeah, it's funny when you bring expectations and reputation into the equation, how things can look differently without context, right? We can sit here and say, oh, the Chiefs didn't make the Super Bowl last year. And you realize that kind of it's basically what you said. It's one drive that could have made all the difference in the world, and that's the difference between some people panicking about the Kansas City Chiefs and calling them an absolute dynasty. It's so fine, that line of where you can have your expectations and how you can view a team. And look, I think the Chiefs certainly struggled on offense last year. I shouldn't even say struggle. Struggle feels like the wrong word. They just didn't look like that unstoppable, no answer for them force that they had been in the past, but they were still a good offense, right? They still outdueled the Buffalo Bills. They still were right there for doing so with the Cincinnati Bengals. They were about to make it back to the Super Bowl, and if they do that, they have the opportunity to win it again. So it's just when people say, man, I'm worried about the Chiefs offense. I'm not worried about the Chiefs offense. I really do. I think that Andy Reid is one of the best play callers, the best offensive minds in the game of football. I think he's going to continue to be creative. And with that being the case, when you have Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback and you've got a coach like that, anything is possible. Yes, losing Tyreek Hill absolutely hurts. Travis Kelce getting up there in age. They've got to establish that next wave of offensive weapons that they have. And I think that the Sky Moore addition is one that I absolutely loved in the draft, and we're already seeing great returns from here in training camp. But I think also the offensive line, when you look at the offensive line, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Joe Tooney, right? You've got Orlando Brown still on the team for now. And it's like, as long as you've got that offensive line and you've got Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, you have a guy who can be elite in structure and elite out of structure. You can find good playmakers outside of that. Not to say that replacing Tyreek Hill is as easy as the snap of a finger, but something that I talk about. I love the NFL draft, and something that I talk about every single year is, yes, you want to prioritize great playmakers because they help out your team a lot. But you got to realize that great playmakers are going to come out every single year. Every single year, every team in the NFL is going to have a chance to get a fantastic playmaker because that's just where football is. You've got high school football, college football now, playing 4 wide receivers, 5 wide receivers. We are just developing more wide receivers now. Therefore, the talent is getting not only higher, but the pool is getting deeper. So with Kansas City, they're in the exact right spot. You're always going to have seasons of how your roster looks, ups, downs, peaks, and valleys. But you've got quarterback figured out, you got play caller and offensive innovator figured out, and you got offensive line figured out. I think with that being the case, a bounce back to and that elite top-tier offense of what people might have expected from the Chiefs, that's not nearly as far off as people believe.
Visiting with Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, our guest. So I've got a theory on, I obviously think that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, and we'll see what happens this year without Tyreek Hill. And you mentioned Sky Moore, things that I want to get into with you because I know that you liked Sky Moore in the draft, and certainly early indications are that he's looked really good at camp as well. But the struggles of the Chiefs last year through the first 12 games versus the last 5 games of the regular season and then first 2 games of the playoffs and the first half of the Bengals game versus the second half. My theory is that I think Patrick Mahomes is going to go scorched earth this year. I think this is a little bit like the Aaron Rodgers 2019 MVP year when he kind of said, you know what, bleep you. It was kind of a bleep you tour or 2020, I should say, 2020 season for Aaron Rodgers, because Mahomes struggles last year, right, for a good portion of the year. This is the first time he's ever gone into an offseason, Trevor, where people have looked at him as the reason the Chiefs did not continue playing. They lose in the AFC Championship game to the Patriots, and it's because they didn't win the coin toss and he didn't get the ball. They win the Super Bowl. They lose the Super Bowl, but he was heroic in losing the Super Bowl to the Bucs. Now he goes into the offseason, and whatever happened in the second half is the reason the Chiefs do not make the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, was he throwing the game? Did a Monstar go and touch him and take his talents? Like, what was he in the second half? And then people are saying, well, Tyreek Hill, good luck, Patrick Mahomes. He's a guy that keeps track of all those things. He keeps notes of all those things. He counted to 10 when they played the Bears after he scored a touchdown. He counted to 4 when they played the Ravens when Lamar was ranked the number 1 player in the NFL by the players and he was number 4. He keeps track of these things. So I think this is going to be a bleep you type tour for Patrick Mahomes, and we're going to see a guy that's going to be more locked in. Do you buy the theory, or is it, Is it more of a wait and see because we don't know what this offense is going to look like without Tyreek Hill, and we're sort of basing it off of we know how good Patrick Mahomes can be and how good Travis Kelce is and what we think the depth of the wide receiver position looks like?
No, I think that it's much more of the former. Like I think that it's much more plausible that we're going to get a bleep you tour from Patrick Mahomes than we've got to sit here and say, what are the Chiefs going to be on offense?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the floor, right, the Chiefs are a top 10 offense in the NFL, dare I say top 5 offense in the NFL. And that's the floor for the Chiefs. That's just how good they are, how talented Patrick Mahomes is, how good of an offensive line they have in front of them. That's the floor for this team. So it's not like there's this big wonder of, oh, are the Chiefs going to lose it on offense? It's just kind of, is that offense going to be good enough to, as we've seen, you mentioned the AFC beefing up, the top-tier teams in the NFC beefing up, right? Can you just keep pace with it? Can you outscore those teams? Is it that kind of an offense? They're not going to be bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, can you be elite enough in the playoffs, which is now getting more and more difficult as offenses get better and better around the NFL. I'm really not worried about Patrick Mahomes. I'm really not. I think that he is going to be totally fine. And honestly, I wonder if points in the year last year, I feel like I don't want to question like whether or not Patrick Mahomes is focused enough, but when you're told you're the best all the time, some people have a natural reaction to let off the gas a little bit, like start doing, a little bit more showboating, start trying the more difficult stuff, being like, we can score at any point in time. We're just like messing around for the first half or whatever it is. And I just wonder if there were points last year to where the Chiefs were almost sipping a little bit too much of their own Kool-Aid. They had the best wide receiver in the world. They have the best tight end in the NFL. They had the best quarterback. And now the offensive line, the young guys were playing well. So it was almost kind of like this, we can come back. It's fine. We're just trying stuff. Almost like they're playing backyard football a little bit at times. And I think that certainly as defenses are changing around the NFL, right, we've seen what guys like Vic Fangio, what guys like Brandon Staley have done over the last couple of years, really putting the roof on coverage, not allowing these great quarterbacks to continue to hit downfield, right? They're almost testing them. They're testing them against themselves. Okay, beat us underneath. Beat us with the short stuff. And I think that it's kind of a culmination of all of those things of what we saw last year with Kansas City. They're battling a lot of those things. They're trying to figure that stuff out while coming off being one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL over the last 2 prior seasons. So I think all that just kind of goes into it, right? It's never a black and white thing. I think there are a lot of things going on at one time that can answer why the Chiefs maybe weren't able to finish the job at the end of the year. But again, let's bring that up. They were close. They were right there. They were in that AFC Championship. They play a little bit better in the second half against the Bengals. They also go up against the Los Angeles Rams. It could be a shootout. We could be talking about the Chiefs as Super Bowl champions. They were that caliber of a team. They could have been that. They just didn't happen to be last year because winning in the NFL, as you very well know, it's hard. It's a coin flip. The margin for error is so small. And so all you can ask for, really, is that you give yourself, your roster, your team, your coaching staff, a chance to be that best team when it's all said and done. And there is without a doubt the Chiefs are still that team. It's just about locking in. It's about staying focused. It's about making some new playmakers out of the guys that are there now. And I think they're absolutely going to be right there in that conversation at the end of the year.
Trevor Sikkema is our guest, Pro Football Focus. And, one of the things that I pointed out is, wondering, when or if the Chiefs can figure out the two deep. And through the first 12 games, and just the stark contrast between the first 12 versus the last 7.5 games. So I'm not counting in the Bengals second half because we're all wondering what in the heck happened at halftime after that play to Tyreek Hill. There's all these different, rumors and comments and nothing actually officially reported of what may have taken place, but something happened there. So through the first 12 games of the season last year, when people were wondering if the Chiefs or what was wrong with the Chiefs offense, that this two deep had broken them. Patrick Mahomes completed 64% of his passes, 280 yards per game for 25 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, which is a 92 quarterback rating. The last 5 games of the regular season, Trevor, and the first 2 games of the playoffs and the first half of the Bengals, 7.5 games, 73%, 330 yards per game, 23 touchdowns and 2 interceptions with a 123 quarterback rating. I feel like something was figured out by the Chiefs in the last 7.5 games, right?
And that's why I still have faith in this team and this coaching staff and in Mahomes himself, right? Because they're able to figure things out. And some teams have the coaches to figure out issues, but they don't have the talent to really execute that.
Mhm.
Other teams have the talent, but they don't have the coaching staff that is leading them to be able to do the things they need to do to overcome what the other team might be doing. Chiefs have both. Chiefs are one of those teams in the NFL that absolutely has both. So it was never a matter of if, it was always when with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that they were certainly on a roll as the season went on. And the icing on the cake for what you're saying here is that Bills game. That Bills game was unbelievable. Both teams had to be basically perfect on offense for that entire game. And you know what? The Chiefs were. The Chiefs were because they were able to figure out. And that is against a good defense, right? We're talking about, if you're talking about 2 deep coverages, right?
Yeah.
Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde are 2 of the best in the NFL. They're one of the best, if not the best, safety duo in the NFL. So if you can figure it out against that team to continue to score, to end up beating Buffalo in that playoff game, that tells you all you need to know that, yes, they understand how to counter what a lot of defenses are doing, putting more guys in coverage, 4 or 5 guys, putting that roof over top of the defense. They know how to do it, just about really going out and executing it. So that first half of the year, you're right, it struggled. It was a little bit slow out of the gate. I wonder if they were a little bit too confident in themselves, and then they really snapped into it as the year went on. So I fully expect the Chiefs to be another team that, as defenses continue to throw new things at them, they'll be able to figure out. And as long as you are catching it hot, if you will, at the end of the season during the playoffs, you got a chance.
Trevor Sikkema is our guest, Pro Football Focus. You mentioned the wide receivers. You mentioned Sky Moore. You really liked him coming out of college and the Chiefs drafting him in the second round. One of the things we've been wondering, and I'll get your thoughts on this, the wide receiving group overall, or at least the top 4, from a year ago when it was Tyreek and Mecole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle. You've got a high-end Tyreek Hill. You've got a middle-of-the-road Mecole Hardman and 2 kind of, average replacement-level players after that. Compared to this year with Juju, MVS, Mecole Hardman, and Sky Moore. There obviously is not that high-end top 5, top 3 receiver in the NFL. But is there a chance that this receiving core 1 through 4 could be better as a group than the one a year ago, 1 through 4, that the Chiefs had?
No, I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say like talent level overall that they're better than last year. I think that would be a little bit too insulting to just how good Tyreek Hill is and how much of a difference maker he is. And Travis Kelce too, right? I'm not saying that Travis Kelce is about to fall off a cliff, but every year is the year that he gets older into his 30s. And so I think that that's something to monitor. That's something that you got to pay attention to, because so much of what he was able to do early on in his career was about that yards after the catch, finding those soft spots in the zone, being able to get those extra yards and have that athleticism to him. Okay, how much does that drop off? Not just this year, but in the years that follow, right? That certainly goes into the equation. I like the group that they have, right? I think that Juju Smith-Schuster, he is a savvy slot receiver. He's that guy who can be very reliable for you. He can be a yards after the catch guy, or at least he certainly was a couple of years ago. And when you look at the offense that they're building, they couldn't go out and get a stud, absolute number one wide receiver. But the way they countered that is with speed, right? Nicole Hardman, speed. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, deep speed. More Sky Moore, all over the field speed, right? And so what they're, I think, trying to do is say, okay, maybe we don't have Tyreek, we don't have a Cooper Kupp, we don't have a Justin Jefferson. But what we do is we're going to throw a lot of speed at you. And if you have one cornerback in your nickel package that is not athlete enough to keep up with our guys, we're going to be able to make you pay. And I think that that's kind of what they're trying to do. It's kind of a package deal thing where Tyreek Hill, when he was on this team last year, he was able to command so much attention, and you can do so much with him, right? You could have him running a shallow cross over the middle, and he can get yards after the catch. You could have him running a deep crosser in the intermediate and really have him behind that linebacker level. Or you could just send him all the way deep, deep post, 9 routes, whatever it was, and he could sometimes torch defensive backs that way. You don't have the luxury of having that all 3 levels of the field threat, I would just say, that can command the attention of the defense. So you've got to do it with multiple players. But I think they have a diverse athletic group there to be able to do that if they put them in the right position. So you need Marquez Valdes-Scantling to be a great deep threat for you. You need Nicole Hardman to be somebody who can really do some damage for you in the short to intermediate. And then I think Sky Moore is the ultimate X factor for them. I really do, because if Sky Moore isn't able to be reliable for them during the regular season, all of a sudden this receiver group doesn't look as threatening, right? And you're going to put a lot more pressure on Patrick Mahomes' shoulders to make the magic happen. But if you could throw Sky Moore in there, given his skill set, how great he can be off the line of scrimmage, how good of a separator he is, how savvy he is as a route runner, and how much he likes being a deep threat as well. If we get that college Sky Moore close to right away in the regular season, then that changes the math a little bit. That makes it a lot harder to defend demands that teams really put 4 good defensive backs out there and 4 defensive backs that have a lot of athleticism with them. So I think that really Moore is the X factor, but that's kind of how I see the Chiefs group this year.
You wrote about Sky Moore when he was in college coming out for the NFL draft, and you do a great job covering the draft for Pro Football Focus. And so we had heard when training camp started, multiple people talking about, he wears number 24. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire was like, the offense is so diverse. I can line up on the outside, and 24 can be in the backfield. Juju Smith-Schuster had said at a press conference, well, 24, I mean, he's like a running back. You give him the ball, and he's going to be breaking tackles, and he does some of those things. Andy Reid had mentioned, like, well, we've got so many different guys that we can do different things with. I mean, Sky, if we wanted to hand the ball off, we could do that. And McCole Hardman on an end around. Multiple people mentioned that, Trevor. Then yesterday at training camp, video comes out, Sky Moore lining up in the backfield, and Patrick Mahomes handing the ball off to Sky Moore. There's a long way from, hey, Sky Moore could carry the ball, to Deebo Samuel, and I think that's a leap too many people are talking about. Like, is he going to be Deebo? Not at all. But do you see to where the Chiefs would say, you know what, we're going to give this guy the ball in the backfield too, because he can do so many different things?
Oh, no question about it. I mean, in my article that I wrote about Sky Moore, one of the very first things that I say is he's about as natural of an athlete as you're going to find on the football field. He really is. I mean, he grew up playing defensive back, playing running back, playing wide receiver. Shoot, he even played quarterback in high school, I believe, because his quote was, he went out for practice the very first day of high school football, and he was playing wide receiver because he wanted to play wide receiver. He said, I think he believed that he ran just a comeback route, and the quarterback overthrew him so bad that the coach went, hey, Sky, you want to try quarterback? And he's like, all right, fine. He never got to play wide receiver again after that. They just put him at quarterback, and they let him play quarterback in high school, and so he ended up transitioning over to defensive back after that. Got recruited mainly as defensive back, but actually got a chance to play wide receiver when he was at Central Michigan. So he is just such a natural, whether it's quarterback, running back, defensive back, wide receiver. He's a guy who you want the ball in his hands. You just have so much faith that he is going to make the right moves, that he is the athlete that he needs to be no matter where he is lining up. And I think he's in a perfect spot with Andy Reid, who we've seen is not afraid at all to get really creative with how he uses his players. And the best coaches in the NFL, I cannot stress this enough, the best coaches in the NFL look at the players that they have and put them in the best positions to succeed, regardless of where the position might be. I think that's why Kyle Shanahan has gotten so much praise, and we see so much love for Deebo Samuel now, is because he looked at Deebo Samuel and said, okay, not only is this guy great as a wide receiver, but what if I put him in the backfield and sometimes got him matched up against linebackers, right? Because defenses, I think that's the biggest area where we see this shift for offenses over the last 5 years against modern defenses because defenses have been a little bit slower to kind of figure out the rules of how we guard everybody, right? As the offenses are getting faster, more spread out, all of a sudden you've got these number one wide receivers like Julio Jones and Mike Evans, and they're playing in the slot against slot corners, and you've got guys like Deebo Samuel or Curtis Samuel or these players coming out of the backfield as these wide receivers that are lined up against linebackers and safeties. And the best coaches in the NFL recognize where they have talent and where that talent can be the biggest mismatch for them. Andy Reid does that about as good as any coach in the NFL. So not only did I love Sky Moore as a prospect, I loved where he went because I knew the Chiefs were going to give him a chance right away to make a difference, knowing how great of a natural athlete he is. So there's no doubt about it. I could see them using him all over the field this rookie year. As long as he knows the playbook, as long as he has his responsibilities, they're not going to have any fear or reservations about where to play him.
Last one for you, Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, also host of NFL Stock Exchange podcast. You guys did the redraft of every player in the NFL. It went number 1, Mahomes, number 2, Josh Allen. How close is that? How close is because, I've said that if somebody wants to argue for Josh Allen, I'm actually not going to offer that much of a, I'm not going to be a heated exchange. I'm like, okay, yeah, I see where I would go different, but I see where you're coming from. I'm picking the Bills to win the Super Bowl this year. How close is it if you're redrafting and every NFL front office sitting there and saying, do we want Mahomes and Allen? How close do you think it would be between the two?
No, I mean, it's a coin flip. I think that it would just change depending on the week, right? If Mahomes if you polled all 32 GMs in the NFL, if Mahomes had a game where he was throwing for almost 400 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns, they might say, nobody's better than Mahomes. Or if you have a crazy Josh Allen game where he's doing a lot of things with his legs and his arm, you go, no, we got to see Josh Allen. It really is. It's a coin flip. And there's not a wrong answer, right? Everybody loves numerical lists. They love this guy over that guy. But this really is one of those. It's one of those situations where there's not a wrong answer here. Now, I am very intrigued to see what Josh Allen is without Brian Daboll there as the offensive coordinator. Not to say that I'm expecting a big-time down year for Josh Allen. I would just love to see it because all of a sudden if Josh continues to play at an MVP level with a new offensive coordinator there, albeit I know they're going to do a lot of the same things, but just a different voice in his headset, that solidifies the conversation without a shadow of a doubt that these two guys are the best in the NFL and that it is this tier of player, especially with the talent levels that they have, at the age that they have. You look at, if you're starting a franchise, how many incredible years you're going to have with both of these guys. And I think that what we saw last year in the playoffs between Allen and Mahomes, I certainly hope that health and these teams allow this to be the new Brady and Peyton rivalry, that we get two of the best in the NFL for the next 10 years getting to go up against each other, New England and Indianapolis, those two teams both in the NFC, so we were able to see Brady versus Manning a lot in games that really, really mattered. I hope that is the case with Mahomes and Allen because we have seen the talent level that these guys have, and it is insane. So that's what I'm hoping for. That's how close it is. Two of the best in the NFL, no doubt about it.
And if they keep winning their division, we'll see it every year. So that'll certainly we all can get that entertainment. Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, also host NFL Stock Exchange. Does a great job covering the draft, covering the NFL as well. Trevor, you're the man. I really appreciate the time. Enjoyed it as usual. So thank you so much for coming on and enjoy the football now that we're closer and closer to games next week starting up. But last night, a Hall of Fame game as well. Thank you so much for the time, man.
It's been beautiful. Guys.
I think we've lost Trevor there, but that's okay. Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus. Again, NFL Stock Exchange. Thank you so much for him taking the time out today to join us and talk about the different things that he's written about at Pro Football Focus and his opinion on some of those things with the Chiefs. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. We got what's on tap. We got the cuts all still to come. Heading up until 2 o'clock on this Friday. It's Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Follow the show on Twitter at J810Anderson, at JB Brisco, at Beards McFly, and at Sports Radio 810. The Zone with Jason Anderson.
It would have been a... Just killed a spider that was crawling on the table here. Take that, spider. Huh? Yeah! In your face! Punk!
Weekdays from 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Thank you to Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, joining us. Boy, perfect timing there at the end when his phone eventually cut out or something. I don't know. So, yeah, worked out well. Could have happened at any time in the interview. Instead, it was when it was letting him go. But thank you to Trevor for joining us and talking some football there. 913-912-4810. You know, we're going to give away some tickets to the WHB 100-year celebration here in just a little bit. But did want to pass along this information that came out today, and that the Kansas City Royals have announced in partnership with the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum and the Negro League Museum as well, that Buck O'Neill's Hall of Fame plaque is going to be brought from Cooperstown to Kansas City for public display next Friday and Saturday. On Friday, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., it will be at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. So Friday, August 12th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., the Buck O'Neill plaque that is actually in the Hall of Fame. The National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum has allowed that plaque to be put on display in Kansas City for a couple of days. And then on Saturday, in conjunction with the ball club's annual salute to the Negro Leagues event. So Saturday, August 13th, the Royals hosting the Dodgers. That's a 6 o'clock start. And the plaque is going to be on field for a pregame ceremony. Then it's going to be moved to the Royals Hall of Fame inside Kauffman Stadium, where you can go and visit and view it and things like that during the game. So pretty cool that Buck O'Neill's plaque is going to be on display next Friday and Saturday. A couple of opportunities. The museum on Friday and the Royals game on Saturday. So again, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. next Friday at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and then at the Royals game on Saturday. So
also, cool. Bob Kendrick, when he was on with us, a couple weeks ago, I guess, he mentioned they were going to have some new news from the museum. The Thanks a Million Buck campaign is what they kicked off just a day or two after we talked to Bob, and lots more information across all of the NLBM's various socials and everything if you want to check out more on that campaign and what they're trying to do there.
Awesome. Absolutely. So that was cool to see that, and the Thanks a Million Buck campaign that's going on as well. The 100-year celebration is coming up on Thursday at the Midland Theater. We've been giving away tickets. Have we done the Twitch and YouTube and Facebook?
I've got some winners picked out.
Beards has been twitching over there all day.
You might have some extra tickets though, so if you're watching on any of those, leave a comment, or like I said on the YouTube one, since I can't directly message you on there, DM me at BeardsMcFly. We'll see what we can do.
Hey, you know what? You want to extend that to some podcast listeners as well? Because we do have,
Really? That's interesting.
We have the army of Zone podcast listeners. I presume our numbers are pretty good. So I don't know if you want to. If you gotta have something to offer, Beards. You gotta. I don't mean like a bribe. I mean, I'm sure he would take it.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Maybe a bribe.
If you give Beards your bona fides or something, I'm not sure how to make that happen. But I want to acknowledge the people that listen to this show in different ways.
That's bona fides for the American.
Yeah.
Damn right.
Pat Angerer.
Well, you're
getting pretty Pat. Jason, you're getting angerer today.
Richard Sherman / Seymour. That's actually Devon Anger.
What would it be
Not
if
Parker.
if those Richards like combined their last names? What would their name be?
Richard Shermore?
Any other ways
Nope.
you could mash that?
Nope.
All right.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Trying to get one more cut in before the end of the week.
Yeah, not going to happen. We'll do the cuts coming up in the next segment. Not right now.
Yeah, do you wanna
913.
play?
No, 913-912-4810. How do we want to give this away? Let's come up with some clever idea to where we can give away a pair of tickets to the 100-year celebration next Thursday.
You want to make it a little? I have a little trivia wrinkle that should be pretty easy. So I think, but we'll see if people can get there.
Is it going to be a call in or a text in?
Yeah, you call in, and
Okay.
I think we could give it to the first. If you are so inclined, we were talking during the break about a baseball graphic that I don't. It's going to be hard to talk about in all the detail that you need to see on the radio. But if you call in and you can tell Beards how many players who were drafted or signed in the Royals organization are currently at the top of their depth chart at their position for another team. Just the number, if you give the players also, I'm not going to give too many hints as to how difficult or easy that may be. But one of them is in Kansas City right now.
There's one.
That's one.
So how many others?
How many other Royals, how many total Royals are there?
Does this include pitchers?
An ace.
Only like a number one starter based off the chart I have here. And I'll give you
Plenty
a free
of those out
hint.
there from the Royals organization.
Free hint: the Royals have not drafted and shipped off an ace at any point recently.
What? So that would be like, for the
Isaiah,
Royals.
tell Beards what the answer is.
So like for the Royals, it would be, well, now you're going to tell the people that are on the
I was
on the
turning
television.
away from the cameras. I was trying to shield the Twitch.
Oh, yeah. So for the Royals, it'd be like, Salvi at catcher. There's one.
Right.
Bobby Witt, Nicky Lopez, players that they have drafted or signed. Vinny Pasquantino and Nick Prod. They would have a lot.
I'll give you the Royals side of it from the graphic. Everybody, including one, that quote-unquote top starting pitcher and quote-unquote top DH, the Royals have one player not from their own farm system organization, etc., being Michael A. Taylor in center field.
They have the most out of all of the different players there. They have the most of any team that is drafted / signed by the Royals organization, signed internationally, or drafted that are the starters at their spot.
Right,
on the depth
which
chart, so.
is cool if they play good baseball. If you're not winning, it's not great. But the other side of that stat that has become our winning trivia question, I think, is
there we go.
Is very interesting.
What's the number? How many players have the Royals drafted or signed that are now a starter on a different team? It's another way to put it. Not a starting pitcher, but just a starter at their position for a different team. They are the top of the depth chart. And a starting pitcher counts as well, but that would be the best starting pitcher of that team. Just how many is it? 913-381-0810 is the phone number, 913-381-0810, and you get a pair of tickets to the 100-year celebration for WHB.
Perhaps
next Thursday.
Perhaps an argument for there to be one additional one to the number I gave you, Beards. Somebody tweeted in noting that I'm just going to give you the name. No, I wasn't counting this originally. I was not counting Frank Schwindel getting a lot of DH work for the Cubs.
Yeah.
But if you're going to include him, it could be one more than I told you, Beards. But I think people should have to give the names.
Well, who do they have as the Cubs?
I have no idea.
Well, that's what I'm going to look at right now. So they have it blank.
Oh, there you go.
I just noticed that they have a blank. It's the only thing that they have blank on any of these. So I'm guessing it's just like no specific player there.
We've given you now arguably Schwindel and definitely a current first baseman for the Boston Red Sox who was in town last night.
Definitely one.
So we've got 1.5.
Yeah.
You should be able to come up with the names of the entirety of the list, I would think.
913-381-0810 is the phone number. But, we discussed Royals baseball to start the show. We've talked a lot of Chiefs football today, but we started off with Royals baseball with Eric Hosmer making his return to Kansas City last night. And a couple of, actual takeaways from the game besides just, hey, here are the memories rushing back from Eric Hosmer being at Kauffman Stadium, is Chris Bubic on the mound last night. That the first inning was a rough one for Chris Bubic. And it's like, okay, here we go. Let's see what Bubic can do. And then he ends up going 5 more innings, not giving up a run. So 6 innings, 2 earned runs, has only 5 base runners, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts last night against the Red Sox. A good outing for the Royals. And he was awful at the beginning of the year this year. They sent him back down. They called him back up. And since he's been called up, that's 12 starts that he's had since called back up. He has a 3.76 ERA. He's got a 1.4 whip, which certainly you need to be better. But a sub-4 ERA, and he's pitching into the 6th inning. He's averaging 5 2/3 innings pitched each time out. So he's going and throwing a pitch in the 6th inning, which there was a stretch for the Royals where they had about 10 or 11 games where pitchers had twice out of their starters thrown a pitch in the 6th inning. It was a rough stretch where you got 4 innings, 3 innings, 5 innings, 4 innings, 3 innings, 5 innings. You couldn't even get to 5 1/3, something like that. So Chris Bubic last night. Also continuing with Chris Bubic, if you take away those games this year when he was just awful, and you look at his entire career outside of those 6 or 7 games, he's got a 4.23 ERA. Oddly enough, a 1.4 whip. So that has been constant. The one constant there has been his whip. And he's got a 2-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. You'd like that to be better. 110 walks and 220 strikeouts. You'd like that to be better. But again, as I've said about Chris Bubic, is if this is your 5th starter, I'm fine with that. I'm fine. And he continues to go out and show that if he's your 5th starter, he can, be a part of a big league rotation. And the rookies in the lineup last night, 5 of them, combined 7 for 18, 3 RBIs, 4 runs scored, a double, a home run, 2 stolen bases in the game last night. And Chris Bubic goes out there and did what he did. It's a fun night last night. Hosmer returns, the rookies look good, and Chris Bubic goes 6 innings. And the only thing missing was that Salvi got credited with the home run instead of a double, because that would have been better if it was a double, because then Scott Barlow could have got the save, and that would have been number 18 for him this year. Instead, they gave a home run to Salvi. That's an extra run, and now Scott Barlow has still 17 saves. He didn't get the save because it was 4 runs.
How dare he?
I know, right?
Salvi, selfish, not a team player. You've often said this.
I may be out on a limb and all by myself on this one, but
Salvador Perez, bad teammate, says Jason Anderson.
That's right. Let's tell you what's on tap this weekend, presented by KC Beer Company, kcbier.com. What is on tap? Well, the Royals tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday, finishing off the series against the Red Sox. Greinke in action tonight. Daniel Lynch on Saturday. Daniel Lynch versus Eric Hosmer. When Hosmer comes up to plate, you will have Daniel Lynch, the starting pitcher, facing off against Eric Hosmer. Hosmer, when he walked, the Royals got the comp pick in which they used on Daniel Lynch. Ooh. And then Brad Keller going to the mound on Sunday.
He's screwed, by the way.
Brad Keller is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going up against Cutter Crawford.
If your name is Cutter Crawford, I know that he's still pretty fresh. I've pulled up his baseball reference page. Cutter Crawford has to be a Hall of Famer. You're a pitcher whose first name is Cutter with a K.
Cutter, that's right, exactly. And it's
incredible.
If it was a backwards K, it'd be even better.
Oh, perfect.
It'd be awesome. Sporting in action tomorrow, 7:30, right here on Sports Radio 810 against L.A. The Current heading to San Diego on Sunday at 4 o'clock, right here on Sports Radio 810. Monarchs in action in Kane County tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday. NASCAR on Sunday, the Firekeepers Casino 400 in Michigan International Speedway. That's going to be on ESPN KC. Premier League starts in about, 13 minutes? Crystal Palace v. Arsenal. And then PGA wrapping up the Wyndham Championship in Greensboro this weekend as well, 2 o'clock tomorrow and Sunday on CBS. That's what's on tap this weekend, presented by KC Beer. We'll take a timeout, come back, more Zone next.
Take the show with you by listening live on 810WHB.com, in the 810 mobile app, or by subscribing to The Zone wherever you get your podcasts. The Zone with Jason Anderson.
If I can't be here to try to get you on a technicality once per show, what the bleep is the point of me being here?
Weekdays from 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
All right, so the answer to that question was 2 that we gave out earlier for the tickets. Beards hates fun and says we don't have a lot of time for cuts, so take it away, Beards. Go.
Eric Hosmer like chugga chugga. Choo choo, mother bleeper.
Winner, Curtis Cougar.
What was it? What?
You did not get.
Set together in a long time.
Thank you so much for the time, man.
Oh, looking beautiful.
Perfect. Jason Anderson Insider is not worse than Jason Insiderson.
We got him to say it. Beards, mark it. We got him to say it. This is the new imaging.
And walked right into it.
There was a story in free agency. One of the teams, they were interested, and all of a sudden they weren't interested at the very end. I was sitting there thinking, you're sticking with that mother?
Are you serious? Tom probably had no desire to go to that team, but now it's like, why don't you want me?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. When I look back, I'm like, I just no way would have went to that team. But they said they didn't want me, and I know what that means. I know what that feels like, and I'm gonna you up because of that.
Here's the Bears.
Had to be.
The first thing that sticks out is the length.
Okay, thanks, Bags.
Well, I was going to start with Royals trade, but I think I'm just going to do Major League Baseball instead.
Oh, bait and switch. Got me.
That is Blinken fertilizer.
Fertilizer.
Great call by Vin Scully.
I banged a paragraph.
Good for you. Whatever you
They
do.
gave me a card.
You playing? No. Like a farewell card. They gave you a farewell card?
Yeah, they did. They sent it to me.
I didn't get no card.
Tyreek.
Jason's logic was so confusing, it just dazes you, and you're like,
Yes.
yeah, I guess.
Yes, that's his plan. He
I have
runs
no
circles
idea
around
what you're talking about.
Would mark that for every returner ever. Oh, Adam, he's figured me out.
Got too many hours on with you.
Cracked the code.
Speaking of your brother, you guys are wearing the new Guardian deal. Did you see he put the bubble wrap on his Guardian cap?
Yeah, you guys thought I was a prick. He's the
TK.
We got some good guys up in the front line, especially Karlaftis getting in there.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about that. We're just trying to have a good training camp here.
Do you have any idea the Dolphins are tampering with your starting quarterback next season?
Yeah, focused on training camp here. That's all I'm about.
Not sure what you thought you were going to get from Belichick.
So check your bags. Make sure you've declared your sausage. That's my lesson of the week. You're welcome.
All right. There we go. All the things you learned this week.
Learned a lot.
The one clip.
Thank you, Jason Insiderson, for such a good week of shows.
Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you. Couldn't have done it without you. We could have, but, it might have been better. So, thank you, Beards. You too. Program, Todd Lebo, Curtis Seabolt next.